Board of Directors meeting for HART. Today is Thursday, June 22nd. It is roughly 8:35 in the morning. Let me just, I know it's not on the agenda, but I want to do an introduction of Hoyt Zia as our new board member and congratulate him for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And his condolences as well. Do we have a swearing in? Do we do that now?
I've already
Or
been sworn.
you already been sworn in? Perfect, saving us time.
Absolutely,
Okay.
that's what I'm all about.
Thank you. And also, Kathy, we do have a lay for you because the very first day I know you didn't make it when I made the announcement that you were on the board, but
Thank you.
thank you. Second item on the agenda is public testimony on any of the agenda items. Do we have anybody for public testimony at this time? Barbara? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Chairman Kim, members, my name's Cliff Slater. I've been following rail for 30 years. And it's the first time I've been before this board or any of its members. 3 years ago was the last time.
Mr. Slater, could you speak more into the mic so we could hear, please?
So I think I can talk about HART's past activities without ruffling too many feathers. Typically, I've been told in the past, we're just here to build it, okay? But the facts of the matter are that HART is, in addition, is the propaganda arm for rail. And examples I can give you today from the benefits on your website. You mentioned, for example, 40,000 car trips will be removed. And the last time I was here and testified, I pointed out that that 40,000 is out of 2,000,008 car trips, and it's a 1.7% reduction. It would not even be noticeable. That same section compares it with when schools are out for the summer. When they're out for the summer, traffic's down 10 or 15%. It's an order of magnitude different than the 1.7% you would get with the cars. So that is really misleading. It is not giving the public an objective view of what will happen with traffic congestion. They are not aware, for the most part, that the city has stated that traffic congestion will be far worse with rail than it is today. That's part of the FEIS. And that also depends on whether they get the ridership or not. You're forecasting 116,000 a day. Okay? If you look at the IMG report, which is well worth studying in retrospect, it's now 7 years old, but it pointed out all the problems, backed up what we had been saying about cost overruns, ridership shortfalls, etc. The thing that they pointed out was that the average ridership shortfall, according to the FTA, on new systems, and this, of course, is a new system, it's not an extension of another system, but on new systems, the average shortfall was 47%, in other words, nearly half. They said that the rail ridership forecast was implausible. And whereas the city was showing an increase after a fare, an increase in ridership after a fare increase, they pointed out that the APTA, American Public Transportation Association, had a fare elasticity study that showed that when you increase fares, the ridership went down.
Mr. Slater, could you please kind of wrap it up, please? Go ahead. You can continue, but please
Well,
wrap it up.
I can go on and tell you how the ridership is distorted.
Okay, you only got, what is it, Cindy, 2 minutes to,
Yeah.
So sorry.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. The agenda says public testimony on agenda items. Can I ask the speaker what agenda item you're speaking to?
I'm speaking to all the agenda items. I would just like to see the new HART board, okay, lay out before the public in objective terms what the ridership is, what the energy usage is.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Since the speaker's not speaking to anything on the agenda, I would think we should just limit his comments to the time that was allotted.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Slater. Do we have anybody else on public testimony? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Randall Roth. I'm not associated with any organization. I'm retired as of the 1st of this month. Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that I have 2 minutes for general testimony right now, and that prior to each of the specific agenda items, I would be given an opportunity for another 2 minutes for more specific testimony.
For voting matters, yes.
Is that correct?
For voting matters,
Okay.
yes.
Are the operating budget and general obligation bond issues, are those up for vote this
Yes.
morning?
Yes,
Thank
it
you
is.
very much.
Mhm.
In my general comments this morning, I just want to point out, and I know you're all very much aware of this, right now the legislature and the city council are trying to make a very, very difficult decision on raising taxes. The consensus seems to be that because of how far rail has gotten thus far, taxes have to be raised by some billions of dollars, and the issue now is exactly how much to raise them, which taxes, how long to extend it out into the future, that sort of thing. Obviously, these are huge decisions that will impact not just us and our children, but future generations down the line. Obviously, in order for them to make informed decisions, they need information that is honest, that's credible, and that is up to date. And in my opinion, my perception is that with respect to estimated construction costs, they haven't in the past had information that was timely and that was credible. I personally think that was predictable. Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, several years ago wrote, "In the world of civic projects, the first budget is really just a down payment. If people knew the real cost from the start, nothing would ever be approved. The idea is to get going, start digging a hole and make it so big there's no alternative but to coming up with more money to continue on." I think that in the past, the people who are on this board then weren't as honest with the legislature, the city council, the public about costs as they should have been. And when we get to the specific agenda items, I have some very specific comments about what I believe to be equally dishonest information about the benefits of rail. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa for the record. I'd like to testify on the progress report and the PMOC report. First of all, you may recall that on the progress reports in the past, it had included information on the, welcome to the new board members, information on the beginning balance, the revenue that came in, and the expenditures, and then the ending balance at the end of the month. And that figure is no longer in there. And I ask you again to put that in there because on a monthly basis, it's really important for us to know what the cash balance is. And, you know, being out in the public, we don't have access to that information very readily. I also want to mention a thank you to the staff for finally correcting the revenue report that shows the 2000 to 2009 and the planned and then the year-to-date. It was nice to see that correction. I'm not sure if the expenditures were also corrected, but at least that was done. On the PMOC report, one of the concerns in there is related to the transition from the operations and maintenance going from HART now to the city. And I've asked the City Council to hold a discussion on that because we went through the budget session and we need to know what liabilities will be coming over to the city. But their concern and the PMOC concern was related to how that transition is going to occur and whether some of that information that is currently within HART may need to also be transferred, meaning staff, and how that's all going to occur. So I encourage you to discuss this. I think it's really important. I mean, this is coming up just like in the next week or two, and the public still has no idea exactly what's happening, how many liabilities are transferring, what this is going to mean in the end for us. And so I ask you to discuss that. And then as the meeting goes on, I have a couple other items I'd like to testify on. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
Good morning. I want to welcome the new board members. Damien's the Lone Ranger. He's the one that's been here from the beginning. But every time they have a new one, you asked all the right questions. I just want to say that I am now a member of Palolo Neighborhood Board, and I was appointed by City Council to the Rate Commission. So we got to get this thing built so I can figure out how much we're going to charge. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, so I'll have to say that whenever I come up and testify. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. Anyone else wishing? Yes.
Good morning, members of the HART Board. For the record, Russell Homa. I'm just wearing a different hat today, so I'm just a transit specialist, retired from the state DOT. I was a consultant as well with the rail project, so I'm going to tell you as it is. As you know, all this speculation of all these numbers, as you know, the problem is we have to move on as well, do some of the damage control and get some public trust again. So in order to do that, I know the legislature's going to have a special session, as you know, in July or this August. They have a tentative schedule date, yes. But through my experience and my connection with the legislature, with the government officials here, you guys got to come up. They're going to be asking a lot of questions and trying to come up with a better measure of coming up with a better cost factor of speculation. As you know, all these numbers that they came up with, 10 billion, 8.2 million, those are all speculation numbers. The construction haven't done yet, hasn't been completed. Those are the procurement process can be renegotiated if they want to. It's up to you guys, even with the contractors and the parts and material. You can renegotiate with the unions, with the prime contract and their subs, and see if you can streamline some of the cost overrun in the change orders they're going to anticipate. That's a lot of the projections. So I just want to let the board know these are all these speculation numbers. If you look at the details of the prime contract, even Kiewit Pacific didn't been on the third phase of the alignment. I know that they gave it to Simic, Taylor, and Granton, which was because the city, the HART, didn't want to pay like roughly $100 million of outstanding bill that they wanted to get paid through their change order and the cost overrun. So, from the HART point, we were questioning them, so they didn't want it to fight that, so they pulled out of this project. But if you pull out of this project, as you know, Kiewit, the prime contractor, has the casting yard for the precasting of the fixed guide rail system. So if the new contractor goes on board, like Simic and Taylor and Granite, if they're going to go through the full phase from Middle Street to Alameda Center, they're going to have a new casting yard, and they're going to have to lay out all the costs. So why reinvent the cost factor? We should renegotiate with Kiewit, or they got to negotiate and use their existing facility for the precasting yard. And it's up to you guys for the HART board to manage those kind of things. So you guys got to get kind of nitty gritty and look into those cost factors. Why is it costing the escalation of this? Because of inflation? Is it going to build a material? This is the island of Hawaii. We can renegotiate a lot of stuff here and what's good for the public. So I just want to note that you guys know when you bring this measure up to the legislature, when they have this special session, make sure that you guys have all the answers and come up with the cost measure alternative plans, plan A, plan B, plan C. Maybe you guys might have to take a furloughs, take a pay cut through the contractor, 10% off the top. That might offset some of the
Can you wrap this up, Mr. Hanma?
And change orders. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys kind of look into those kind of measures, what's happening with the subcontractor and the subs and what the procurement and the cost factors are. Why is it you guys don't have the
Mr.
estimated
Hanma,
cost of the
can you wrap
projection?
it up already?
Okay, thank you. So I just want to, be on top of it and be careful when you approach the legislature during the special session, because they're going to be observing. As you know, what happened with the House side, we have a new leadership there. So make sure that you guys have the answer. Now, I want you guys all be at the legislature.
Thank you,
They're
sir.
going to be asking you guys a question. Just don't let the HART officials be there. You guys got to make the appearance as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more testimony? If not, moving to item number 3, board leadership election. This, as a reminder, I know we have a lot of new board members here, and HART renews its board leadership, chair and vice chair, every year in July. There's no set term limits. There's basically, it doesn't matter whether it's a council pick or it's a public or it's a mayor's pick. It is the pleasure of the board. Hoyt, you had some.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as one of the new board members, I was going to ask if we could table the leadership election for 2-3 more meetings until I'm speaking just for myself, but as you noted, there are so many new board members. So we have a chance to, this first time I met you was a couple days ago. Terry Lee, I met you just in passing last week, so we get a better idea, given all the things that are going on right now, as to who is who and whether it's appropriate. Plus, I note that although it may traditionally be the time in July to do the election, you both, I think, have only been in place since last November, and there is no specific date under the charter required for having this election. In any event, just so for the purpose of getting to know the leadership and the elders on the board, I would ask that we table this, so I feel more comfortable in participating in the vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
That was a motion. I'll second it for the
Yep.
same reasons. I think that it'll give us all a chance to get to know each other better, and perhaps later in the meeting I'll talk about this. But Natalie Watts did raise an issue about the transition, the transfer of responsibilities, as well as the new responsibilities of the board under the charter amendment, and I think we'd like to kind of work out these kinks before we look at
Okay.
other issues.
So there's a motion, and I believe a second. Is there any more discussion?
I would just like to speak in favor of the motion. I also was kind of caught by surprise, and I had the intent ever since I joined the board to speak to each board member individually, and of course it's hard to do when some of us have just been appointed. So I think this will give us a little bit of time to get to know each other better, and I think it's also important to see what happens with the legislative session.
Okay. Any other more discussion, please? If not, so motion is made to table this for about 2 to 3 meetings. There's second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Others
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for agreeing to serve for a few more meetings.
I just was going to say, does that mean I have to stay as chair? Thank you. Moving to item number 4, which is the board committee membership. Being that we do have a new makeup of board members, we have 5 committees that HART has made, which is, one is government affairs, audit, legal matters. The second is finance. The third is project oversight. The fourth is TOD, or trans-oriented development. And the fifth one is human resources. It's currently on the government and affairs, audit, and legal matters. The chair is Terrence Lee. Vice chair is Terry Fujii. And Glenn Nohara is one of the members. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Hoyt and Wes, you folks both agree to sit on government affairs committees. Is there anyone else that would like to volunteer their time? Okay, seeing none.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
excuse me, I forgive me because I'm not familiar with all the rules and stuff. I do want to bring up one issue, and this may or may not be the appropriate time, about board committee membership. but one of the issues that I was asking our council about was how to, again, being new, we wanted to learn as much as possible about what the board does and the committees do, if it's possible to attend meetings as a non-committee member. And I was told that under the Sunshine Law, that was not permitted. Our council, Randall Ishikawa, did distribute, and I think it's in the books, the Office of Information Practices memo that was issued 2008, I think, with respect to a Maui Council membership question regarding the same thing. I've read the opinion, and I believe that I do want to ask that and make a motion at the appropriate time that our council go back and review or seek to have to review the opinion to find out whether it's still accurate and applicable to our situation. My point being, and this bears on membership, I actually have asked to serve on every committee, just because if that's the only way to be able to participate, then fine. But I also think that may not be necessary under the laws, under the opinion that is written, simply because it doesn't make any sense that we shouldn't, when the public can participate in any of these committee meetings, but we can't, simply because we're board members. And I think there are different ways to address the situation. I'm not sure that having me as a member of every committee makes a lot of sense, especially since it could implicate quorum issues and that kind of thing. So anyway, my point is, I think that at various times, many of us would like to see what's going on at a particular committee meeting because it's important to the work we do. And I think that, again, so my request will be at the appropriate time to have our council review the opinion and see if there are different ways that we can do this without requiring every member who's interested in committee work to be a member of each committee.
Okay. I defer to our core counsel.
Good morning, Deputy Corporation Counsel Randall Ishikawa. Yes, we had provided the copy of the OIP opinion on this matter to the board member, and actually has distributed it to the other board members as well. We are available to discuss this further and to conduct research and other items. If there's going to be a discussion on this, we would suggest that it be done in executive session, as it would be securing the advice of counsel on the board's duties and responsibilities.
Okay. You want to call a special session to be able to discuss this at this time, or you want to do this at a later date then?
Well, I think it should be done during this meeting, again, in connection with the fact that we're talking about appointing people to committees. But the timing of the executive session, I didn't mean to interrupt things this much by asking the question.
Well, it would be with regard to this particular matter, is that correct?
So we should do it on this agenda.
Yes, so the executive session could be.
So I would
requested.
request that we would move into executive session then.
And there would need to be a vote on the going into
Correct.
executive session.
So there's a motion to go into executive session to discuss the board committee memberships. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Okay. Go into executive session. Call this meeting back to order out of executive session. We are going to have core counsel look at the rules of the Sunshine Law to see if we can adjust our committee's attendance itself. But moving on until that matter is resolved. Finance Committee, I have Terry Fujii as the chair. Vice Chair is Terrence Lee, Ford Fujigami, John Henry Felix, and I would like to add onto there Hoyt, Amber, and Wes as well on the Finance Committee. Project Oversight, myself is the chair, Terrence Lee as vice chair. I would like to add onto that as members Glenn Nohara, Hoyt, and Wes as well. On TOD, chair, I would like to add Amber, vice chair Hoyt, Terrence Lee, John Henry Felix, and also adding West to that as well. Human Resources, Hoyt will be the chair, vice chair will be myself, members will be Terrence Lee and Wes. Is there any other board members wishing to sit on any other committee that I mentioned?
Chair, is it possible for me, as acting director, understanding the nature of that appointment, that I be also on the TOD committee?
Yes, I believe you can, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Kathy. Okay, again, thank you folks for your participation. Moving to item number 5, approval of meeting minutes. We have A of April 20th, 2017. It's in your binder. Can I get a motion to accept?
So moved.
You're a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, motion
Oh,
carried.
Abstain. I wasn't
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry.
so-
Okay. B, May 18, 2017.
And I have to abstain on the May. Oh, sorry, you were in April.
Yeah, this is the May one.
Yeah.
If there isn't any corrections, can I get a motion to accept?
So move.
We hear a second.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
I'm also abstaining because
I
I
am
wasn't
as-
in attendance.
I am as well. I
Thank
was
you.
not there.
Okay. Item number 6, Resolution 2017-7, adopting operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2018. Robert, you, and Darren?
Good morning, board members. With me is our budget analyst, Darren Moriguchi. So we're here to answer your questions. So this item requires board approval, is for our fiscal year 2018 operating and capital budget. The fiscal year operating budget is for an amount of $34,934,625. And that represents a 3.6 million increase from fiscal year 2017, or an increase of 11%. The capital budget, the fiscal year 2018 capital budget, is for an amount of $440,990,089. These budgets were approved by the HART Board of Directors back in November 2016. After the approval, it was subsequently transmitted to the City Council for their approval, which they did earlier this month at the amount that the board passed back in November. So just to summarize the operating budget for fiscal year 2018, the significant increases are in the area of labor costs, which includes salaries and benefits. There was also increases in professional services, and that category really has to do with some of the new public outreach programs that we want to do going forward. Also, there's increases in the rental expenditure area. Now, the actual rental expenditures hasn't really substantially changed. The budget adopted by the board last year were lower than what our forecast rental expenditures were going to be in fiscal year 2017. The other area which we decreased was an account called Transit Mitigation Fund. And the purpose of that fund was to assist businesses in the transit corridors that were affected by construction. and due to FTA regulations, we weren't able to use that money. And that's really some of the substantial changes between fiscal year 2018 and 17 in the operating budget. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have, both the operating and capital.
Since the November meeting, has anything changed in the capital budget that you presented to the board at that time?
No, it has not. It remains at $440 million.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I have a number of questions. Would it be appropriate to do this now?
Yes.
Okay. Because I wasn't here in November when the board adopted the initial budget submission, which was due in December, and before I can vote on this resolution to adopt this budget, I have some questions that I think should be brought publicly forth. So I apologize for the delay in the meeting as a result of that. Okay, let me start on the first. I have 4 questions, 4 subject areas. And the first one has to do with the increase in staffing for the public information office, the PR part of it. And I want to tie it in with the deletion of the transit mitigation funds. I'd like to talk about those 2 things together, even though they're separate budgetary items. The first issue is this budget calls for an increase of 2 staff positions. And I understand because rail is getting bigger, there's a greater, as you build more, you need to educate more, and there's a need for more public dissemination of the activities of the rail. And so it makes sense to add additional staff as the project grows. But I want to at least voice a concern, or maybe I should say voice an issue about the expansion of this function that was questioned by the City Council way back when. I think Chair Kim knows because he was there at the beginning, and resulted in the City Council's audit of that function, which generally said it was justified, but it was too big. And so I just want to make sure that we're not going back in that direction again. But assuming that the reason for the need for these additional staff positions is to get the word out and to educate the public as well as businesses about where rail is going and what's going on, that goes to the issue, I think, of metrics for this function. Because as I don't see any metrics, I don't know if there are any metrics, but I do know that public confidence in the rail is at an all-time low. And it seems to me that just educating the public about where you're going, what you're going to do, where the traffic's going to go, and all of these other widget things, these technical things, is one thing that, as a board member of a month, and even being in the city managing director, and I know a lot about rail, it just goes right over me. So this technical stuff isn't enough. And there has to be a plan to not just educate the public and reach out to the public, but a metrics for successfully doing it to rebuild public confidence in the rail. So that's that part of it. And then I want to talk about very quickly about the Transit Mitigation Fund, which I think is a connection. Now, it's my understanding that you did not spend the money that the City Council added to the FY17 budget, and I'd like an explanation as to why you didn't spend it. And obviously, it's not in this budget. I think that the City Council's concerns were something that I shared when I was managing director, continue to share, that it's not enough just to tell the businesses that are along the rail, the alignment, what's happening, but it's to try and figure out a way to help them. So, shall I just go issue by issue and give them a chance to respond?
I guess give you a chance to respond.
Okay, well, I'll just summarize the question. The first question has to do with community and business outreach, and it has to do with not only the 2 additional positions that we're asking for, which brings the in-house positions to 5, but also whether, whether HART has any way to measure the effectiveness of those programs. So that's one question. The other question is the use of the Transit Mitigation Fund. Now, I could sit up here to tell you, to read out the programs for the board, but I'll have Bill Brennan, our Director of Public Relations, to come up to talk about some of those programs and the things that he does, and he and his staff do, in a more detailed way. So.
Bill.
Thank you. Board members, Bill Brennan, HART's Director of Communications. We do have metrics. This board used to have a balanced scorecard that measured several components of the project, including public outreach. I think the last time that was used was at the end of last year, 2016. It had kind of a color-coded red, yellow, green legend for measuring the effectiveness and the outreach and the status of certain aspects of the project. And the every balanced scorecard that came out in those areas that measured public outreach, we always had the green dot. So we measured the number of meetings we have, the number of neighborhood board meetings we attend, the increase in the number of users of our social media, among other things. We also, as part of the contracts with our contractors, they have public outreach specialists, and they're actually the ones who kind of day-to-day touch the businesses and residents in the areas that they're working in. They do market research at least annually, if not more often, and we are, and they share that information with us. They do 2 separate areas of market research, one with residents and one with businesses, to find out the effectiveness of their outreach. There's always room for improvement, but I think overall the satisfaction of our outreach efforts is, I would say, in the 60 or 70% range, and in some cases, depending on the question asked, is higher than that. So, I mean, basically the bottom line is, yes, we do measure the effectiveness of our outreach. When we do our outreach, we hear a ton of support. We were out Saturday night in Kaka'ako with the TOD people at the Honolulu Night Market. It was our first time there. Perhaps we should do surveys while we're out at those kind of events, because there were thousands of people there, and hundreds of those thousands came to talk to us about rail. They have questions about the station, about the route. When are you going to finish this thing? How much is it going to cost me to ride? And that's the chief function of our outreach, is to answer questions from the public that they have about the project. And well over 90% of the people who came to the booth support the project. And we find that everywhere we go. So I don't know that there's a metric that measures public confidence in the project that, I hear you, Director Shim, talk about as being at an all-time low. I don't know if that's really the case. I don't see surveys that show that. I think the polls that I read in the newspaper and online show that a minority of people are against the project, and a majority of the people in varying degrees favor the project. And as I say, what we hear out in the public, which maybe we'll have to measure and come share with you, is overwhelming support for us to finish the project. Can't wait to ride. Hope I can ride it before I die. Those kinds of comments that you know, does our small staff a lot of good to hear.
I'm delighted to hear that and very pleased that you're able to report on this. And perhaps for purposes of the special legislative session, some of this information could be communicated to our legislators, because I think they need to hear the good stuff, not
Yes.
just all the bad stuff, or not just the opposition. And so perhaps Mr. Murthy and the board chair can consider putting some kind of package or presentation to the legislature in this area.
Yeah,
We'd be
Mr. President,
happy to
if I
help.
may, I just wanted to, as I understood, part of what members' request about metrics is to make sure that, although it's been described as us being part of a propaganda machine of some sort. The fact of the matter is, this is important stuff to know. And
Yes.
so the education part, so in terms of metrics, perhaps it's a matter of reviewing and revising the metrics to make sure that they include and measure the ability to disseminate information about support for the rail, as well as the education efforts to make sure people understand what the correct statistics are, correct information, and how it actually is going to work, so they have something to look forward to.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, and welcome to the board. You know, I think if there were any criticism, it would come if we weren't doing these kinds of things. The fact that we are out in the public and we're always looking for venues. I mean, since I've been director of communications, my philosophy is to go where the people are instead of make them come to us. So instead of having a meeting at the Blaisdell or here, to go to the night market, because there are going to be thousands of people there. We go to Pearl Ridge Center where hundreds of people throughout the month, and on Saturdays that we're there, drop in with families and, you know, look at our maps and we share our collateral, and as I say, answer their questions. I look at it as our job to educate the public. And you're right, Director Shim. I mean, the project continues to grow. For a time, it was only Kiewit building Guideway on the west side. Now we have stations being built, and we have an airport contract, and we're still on the west side, but we're also now coming east of Aloha Stadium, and we meet with business groups. We meet with Kalihi Business Association. We meet with all the businesses now. We've met twice, December and April, in the airport section. And that's important to us. And I think that there is a greater need for emphasis on business outreach and business communication. I think we've learned some lessons the hard way on the west side, but we have an opportunity now on the east side to take those lessons we've learned and do a better job with our communication efforts and our business impact mitigation efforts, especially on the east side as we start building this way.
Director Shin, if I could kind of ask a question on this particular line item. I don't know, Bill, whether you have this in front of you, the
I have nothing
actual
in
page
front of
11. I'm wondering, the staff positions go from 5 to 7, so that's an addition of 2, but the amount of budget for salaries only goes up by $3,800.
Because we don't pay anybody any money.
I was wondering whether they're going to
No,
take a big
I
pay
don't
cut
know.
or something.
That's probably more a question for Robert.
Director Faiseki, what page are you on?
On page 11, the second table, it's
Okay.
down towards the bottom. There's a year-over-year changes. If you go down, you'll see that the increase in FTE positions is going from 5 to 7, so that's +2.
Yes.
But the budget, the salary budget's going from $520,400 to $524,200. So that's an increase of $3,800.
That's correct. Because of the hiring process, I don't think we expect to get someone in right on July 1st. So, you know, we're not budgeting to have 2 positions starting on July 1st. We think they will start in December, January, February, depending on how quickly the hiring process could be done. So, yeah, we try not to include an entire year of salary in the budget. We know that the positions are not going to be actually higher on July.
Amber. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Kathy, you had a
Well,
question?
on this issue of public information, I just want to say that personally, I've been involved in rail and TOD far longer than anybody else on this board. So I have personally participated in the public information outreach that HART has been doing. I was at the Kakako Night Market on Saturday night, and they're doing an amazing job on public outreach. It's hard work. It's people giving up their weekends and nights for these meetings as an affirmative way to get that word out. And we've been doing this in a collaborative way. And so what you don't see in this budget is the benefits for TOD and the symbiotic, really, relationship between having a booth that is literally manned with HART staff and TOD staff. And there's mutually complementary conversations going on amongst the staff as well as with the public. And so you're not seeing all the benefits just from a salary standpoint or even the metrics. But yes, they count every single person that asks a question. They engage all sectors of the community in their booths in different ways. And it's a necessary requirement. I'm not sure what they need the 2 extra people for, but it's a very worthwhile program.
Can I compliment Director Sokagawa? I actually bumped into her at the auto show of all places in a booth. And I thought it was next to the HART booth. And I thought that was really interesting that we would be there explaining HART and TOD at a car show. And we engaged each other in quite a conversation about that. And Director Sokagawa said, this is where you meet the real people that have real opinions about rail at a car show. And that really stuck with me, and I think that's so true. A lot of times we hear people voicing their opinions because they're very involved, they're very attentive, but this program has really reached out to the grassroots public, and I commend you, Bill, for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank you, Kathy.
You know, I've served on the board for 2 years, and I was, with the board when we transitioned from, some of the older members to now, everyone being virtually new except for Damien. And what I noticed is a shift in the level of scrutiny that the directors are prepared to do on this project. I don't think it's just because the project, faced these budget overruns and problems. I think it's just the nature of the directors that have joined the board. And so I want to let the public know that as far as I'm concerned, and I fully expect, Amber and Hoyt to be the same type of directors, we're not just rubber stamping things on behalf of the mayor or the council or whatever. We are serving as public servants. These are volunteer positions. We spend a lot of time behind the scenes understanding what it is that's presented to the board in a public forum so that we can make informed decisions. And believe me, we ask questions, we criticize, we challenge, because, this project is too important for us to do anything less. If we're not prepared to make that sacrifice in time and effort, then we shouldn't serve on the board. And so I just want to share the fact that, this board is doing its job to the best of its ability, recognizing, however, that we have to necessarily rely upon the expertise of the consultants and the staff that are tasked with studying these very difficult problems, particularly as it relates to cost. Because until the actual contract's awarded, we don't know what the real cost is going to be. All we can do is try to do the best job we can to forecast those costs. And I've taken a deep interest in understanding what the methodologies and protocols are in how HART has been coming up with this roughly $8.2 billion construction cost because of the mistakes that were made in the past. And based on my investigation of these protocols, and it has become more robust, I am confident that we have the best available forecast in cost that we can possibly get. And I validated that by personally asking the members of the peer review, the APTA peer review folks, as well as the PMOC consultants, whether they feel that our methodologies and protocols were as good as you can get. And they unequivocally told me absolutely. So they have confidence in the forecasted numbers to the extent you can have any confidence in forecasted numbers. Again, I think it's important that everybody recognize that's what it is. It's a forecast. So, you know, I just wanted to provide that insight into, you know, how this board operates and the directors, because the public's entitled to know. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one other comment. I agree with everything that Terry said. And I would ask Bill, I think one of the other things that we owe the public is to be accessible at the occasions that you're talking about, to talk about what we know. I mean, it shouldn't just be limited to those who are watching this, right, or reading the minutes. So I would just ask that, to the extent you're not doing it, and you may very well be, and I just don't know because I just joined the board, but to let us know when the car shows or other Kakako events or whatever are going on, so that if we can join you.
Yes, I appreciate that.
We just want to check out the new car.
Not have to pay the $2 entry fee. Exactly, and I don't blame you. And no, you're right. Wes is exactly right. It seems counterintuitive that at an automobile show that rail would find people to talk to, but actually our booth is very well attended. We have the electric vehicles, so people are interested in those these days. But, you know, I mean, I appreciate board member Shin's questions. You know, you're new, and I think you're well within your rights to ask these questions. I look at it as an opportunity for us to inform the board and the public who may be viewing this that we try very hard to have a robust outreach plan. And I do think, I'm not sure how the business impact mitigation funding works. I mean, I understand that HART cannot provide funds to businesses impacted by construction, but I know from being out and talking to businesses, they would love something like that. We offer a lot of programs, we offer a lot of help during construction, but I think the thing we hear most is we would like some money, some financial assistance in, you know, meeting their monthly bills, electric bills, those kinds of things. So whatever it would take to create that kind of fund, I think that would go a long way.
Robert, I think that for purposes, we can't do anything for the FY18 budget, but going forward for FY19, especially as we're moving into the city center, the urban core, where a lot of businesses are going to be affected along the Dillingham route all the way through Kaka'ako, assuming we get funded for that, then we find a way. I understand that the federal money can't be used for that, and that makes sense, but perhaps the legislature in its wisdom might give us a little bit of latitude as they fund through the GET, if they're going to do that, to use some of that money to help businesses along the way, because I think that will go really far. And that was something that when I was with the city, we really tried to figure out a way to do that to help the businesses along the way. So maybe we can just think about that going forward.
Yeah, sure. When we're looking at the fiscal year 2019 budget, that certainly will be something that we'll take a look at, on top of maybe working with DTS to look at, you know, service changes in the Dillingham corridor. Should we go into city center? That is one of the busiest transit corridors on the island. So yeah, we will sit down with DTS and look at it from a transit standpoint, and also look at our budget to see what other things we could do to help mitigate some of the inconveniences of not just the businesses, but also, you know, customers, public.
the fair
Robert,
riders.
I'm sorry, if I can ask a question, just to follow up on something Amber said. If there were a change in the budget, at this time, particularly if we were going to reduce the budget somehow, would that require going back to the council for their review and approval, or is that something we could do? Just
You know, Director Z, I need to have Corp Counsel come up. That
I'll take advantage of that.
okay, thanks, Bill.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
the question is if we were going to make a change to the budget. So now before us, City Council reviewed it, they approved it, and I guess we're going to ratify that this is something we want to do. There were no changes recommended. If we decided for some reason there's something that we didn't need, for example, as opposed to increasing the budget, we want to decrease the budget, would it have to go back to the council for their review and approval?
Again, I would have to look into that and see what the proper mechanism for that. We had in the past given advice to the board that the components of the budget that are under HART's control, and I believe those were the federal monies as well as the GET revenues, were within the board's province as to what it wanted to do. But I can look at the change aspect and get back to the
Thank
board
you.
with an opinion.
Thank you. Amber.
Okay, I have,
Mr. Murthy?
Chair, just I wanted to reinforce the importance of the public outreach. One of the most important things we try to do is communicate to the business community and other property owners what to expect as a result of the upcoming construction, the noise levels, access to their properties, how we try to do it so they can prepare themselves. And if they need any assistance from the contractor to maintain that access, contractor will be there in the meeting. So that's the forum we try to use to get the community educated.
Okay, thank you.
okay, one down, three more to go. Following up on the issue of the budget allocation for operations. Now, because this function is to be transferred to the city and DTS, I wondered why we still had it in here, or do you still intend to go forward with the O&M staffing increase that is proposed for FY18?
The OM,
I can answer the question. I think one of the importance of the operations is the operation people need to be on board right from the start-go of the design so that they can define the operating requirements and our design criteria, and the actual design itself meets the requirements of the operation they're going to be handling in the future. Because O&M costs can be astronomical if they are not brought in much earlier into the design process. That's the reason we have them. This is the bare minimum that we need to make them work with our designers and the car manufacturer.
I think that's a fair and reasonable answer, and it's not my intent to ask that you not fill those positions. My concern is more about the transition and of this function. Because it's huge. It is, and we're supposed to be doing it in a couple of weeks, and I don't know which committee you've assigned this function to, Chair, and I would like to volunteer if it's totally within your purview to make this decision, to assist in this transition, because I know city and I know. And I think I might know enough to help facilitate that, all the transitional issues with the new charter amendment, including another one that I'll go into later. But this is a big issue, and the fact that DTS is not funded for this transfer of responsibilities poses a bigger issue, but it doesn't mean that we should not prepare for this transition, so.
Director Shin, may I make a few comments on that point? Yes, we have been working cooperatively with HART on looking at different ways of making the transition. I think the major thing, though, was the extension of the general excise tax and seeing where this organization is headed over the next couple of years. In terms of the short term, there may be some staffing in it, but it may be staff that comes from DTS over to HART in this particular building because we're a little short of space. We have some folks that deal with parking issues downtown that actually would be better located in this particular facility. So we have been going through where HART's going to be, not just this coming year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, looking at different staffing scenarios and seeing how to go through a year-by-year transitional process. We don't feel an urgency to do something now. In fact, we had requested a couple of budget positions for this year, and we thought we should put those off until next fiscal year. I'd be glad to sit down with you, though. You might find it intriguing. We've got this huge, massive spreadsheet that goes through position by position and how some of the current DTS positions actually could become HART positions and vice versa. And we're still in the middle of trying to sort through all that. But what Director Murphy said is absolutely on target. HART needs to continue making sure that the talent is working with the contractor and getting up to speed on how to operate the system. And so that's not incompatible with the Charter Amendment number 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, my third issue is the debt service. As an operating expenses, I think there is the FY18 budget has 12 million, up 2 million from FY17, and that is, does that include the potential debt service for the possible 350 million bond?
Yes.
Okay. And that's enough?
That's enough.
For FY18?
Yes, for FY18.
And that
you're
includes-
talking about the 350, or you're talking about the interest and.
Well, whatever you would have to pay on the debt service for the 350
Oh yeah, we did a
million bond
calculation.
initiative. Okay.
That's adequate.
And that
yes.
would also include the commercial paper that you're going out to get?
Yes, and the fees for
And
the
the fees.
commercial paper. Yes.
Okay, all right. And my last question has to do with the $250,000 for the special audit. And it's less of a question and more of a comment about that. I understand that the board put this in the budget in November when it approved the budget, and I would just ask that before that money is spent, assuming it's not going to be spent for the mandatory audits that you have to do, you know, your regular financial audits, but for whatever the special audit, whether it's a forensic or something else, that the board has an opportunity to discuss, debate, and determine whether or not it's a wise use of funds, given the fact that when the board put this in the budget in November, we did not have the APTA peer review, and I thought we weren't getting the regular reports from PMOC Jacobs. And so, as a new member of the board, it's not my intent to muck around in the past and try to figure out what we did wrong in the past. It's more trying to get forward and try to make sure that we're spending appropriately and we're doing very cost-conscious decisions, and we're monitoring everything going forward. And what I like about the APTA peer review as well as the PMOC reports is that it primarily talks about management and process, as opposed to saying we made a screwy, stupid decision back then. And I think going forward, that's what I would like to do, unless there's some critical issue where we suspect there's like fraud or embezzlement or something like that that really does need that type of an audit. As I said, I'd rather not spend the money and use it in another way that would be moving the process forward.
I can't resist. I need to jump in again. I would like to see your comment number 2 or question number 2 linked with your question number 4, because part of my difficulty is I have no budget whatsoever to look at what needs to be done to make the transition to comply with Charter Amendment number 4. So rather than spending the $250,000 and looking at the past and then wonder what we do about it, maybe we've already fixed the things that would be uncovered, and I think we have actually. I would like to ask the board to think about doing the things that you said. Let's sit back and kind of look at this budget item. Given what the council said, I think we have discretion to change that and use it for something positive. So I will make that request at the right time. I don't know whether this is this the right time right now to perhaps make that request?
Yeah, we
Can
have
I
something-
request the chair, I think please give us an opportunity to, since we are in the process of doing some restructuring of the organization to fit into the upcoming projects that we have to handle and the financial issues that we need to deal with. So I think we may need some assistance from outside, the specialty type of individuals or firms to do some kind of audit type of work for each group that we have within HART. So I would like to come up with a proposal to the board to consider using part of that 250,000 to do those things.
Well, we do have an item on top of the agenda that, today regarding an audit. So we can take a look at that time, but we also can have Core weigh in on looking about the changing that Board Member Hoyt had talked about, whether we can, how does it affect whether we need to go back to the council or not. My understanding from the past, and me being here the longest, is that we submit our budget to the city council for approval. It's not mandatory that we do it, but we do it out of consideration for the city and county council, because just like what we're going to be doing today, we also have to get their approval of getting government bonds issued for us on our behalf. So if they don't agree, they may not agree of giving us bonds to help pay for this. So it's all a matter of courtesy, and it's been working all these years as far as letting them review it. And if there is any changes where we need to make, then it's brought before the board again to talk about internally without changing the overall cost of what was already accepted in there. Okay, so. Okay, thank you. Amber, is that four?
Done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll take testimony at this time. Barbara?
Good morning still, Barbara Armentrout. I am a member of Palolo Neighborhood Board and also a member of the Rate Commission that we're just starting, but I'm speaking as an individual. And what Wes said about DTS, that Charter Amendment 4 has to do with the Rate Commission. And I know part of that says maybe meeting annually. I think a Rate Commission is going to at least hopefully meet quarterly. You can't just meet once a year and decide what you're going to charge on parking, handyman, bus. You got to read what's going on. You don't just sit down one time. Okay, this is it. We'll see you next year. That don't work. I don't think it works anyway. I appreciate Director Shin's questions because she hit a lot of this. What I noticed on this was overtime, where they can put in $158,000 for 2018 overtime. I know every year I have an ask about overtime. Is there overtime? Is there night shifts, whatever? Oh, no overtime, no night shifts. And then when I'm looking back here at this overtime labor cost, it's gone up every year, but every time we've asked that question, that's page 15, oh no, we don't have any night shifts, we don't have any overtime. But it comes out in the wash, it comes out in the end because it has to be accounted for eventually. But all along, it never was when we'd ask those questions. Also another one, rentals. Rentals went up from $1,700,000 to $2,400,000. What are they renting? Can't you just buy something? Are you renting more furniture? And then, let me turn the page here real quick. I think too, if you're doing some outreach, I think they need to go to all neighborhood boards because the whole island is vested in having this rail. And all I see is they're only out in Kapolei and all there. They need to go to all the neighborhood boards and do some outreach. And I know Saturday is going to be the installation of the board members for neighborhood board. Also, I noticed here that there's going to be 2018 less one position for executive office, but it went from 790,000 to 1,240,000, but you got rid of one position. Did the other ones get a raise? I don't know. But anyway, quality assurance, these two things I'm really concerned about. Quality assurance and system safety and security. One position was lost from quality assurance. 2 positions were lost from system safety and security. Those should always be topmost, that there should be quality assurance and system safety and control. Also, then I've noticed that when they have travel out of state, I've noticed the different things for Railvolution. Well, I've looked up Railvolution last year, and there's a scholarship, and I've applied for that scholarship being on the rate commission to see if I can get a scholarship to go, because there's no board or nothing gonna pay for me, but I'm gonna see if I'm gonna get one. So I may be at Railvolution, because there is a scholarship. So you have to ask to see if you can get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other testifiers?
I greatly appreciate the interest that has been shown in the PR aspect of what you're about to vote on, the operating and capital budget. And I appreciate the interest in educating the public, and I can appreciate why you would be a bit offended when people use the term propaganda. We are talking about what people who've been on the board in the past have done, but some of what some of us view as propaganda is still on your website. The promises about 10,000 new jobs is half the story. The University of Hawaii economists have pointed out if you want to help the public understand the impact on jobs, you have to point out that when you take billions out of the economy with the excise tax, you are costing some jobs. One economist at the University of Hawaii has done the numbers and has suggested that rail is costing a net 1,000 jobs a year. Energy savings. Your website talks in terms of rail saving energy, but that's based on an assumption that the efficiency would be comparable to what you have on a weighted average basis across the country. New York City, which is phenomenally efficient because of its great population, skews that tremendously. When you look at the smaller areas like ours, you find that energy efficiency on a BTU per passenger mile basis in Hawaii would be less energy efficient, not just less energy efficient than the bus right now, but less energy efficient than one person in one car right now. The reason, of course, is that you're going to run rail 20 hours a day, and it's only going to be remotely close to busy at 2 intervals during that day. On ridership, I understand you saying it's just a forecast, cost, just a forecast, but forecasts are what decisions are based upon. I think you all know the consultant that did our ridership forecast here in Hawaii also did the forecast for the last elevated heavy rail system to be built in the United States. Hopefully you know that that forecast turned out to be, well, a little bit off. In fact, more than a little bit off. For every 4 people that forecast said would show up to ride rail, 1 actually showed up. Let me make clear what I'm talking about because it sounds almost unbelievable. What we found after that system was built and we got to the year that the forecast had focused on and compared the actual number of riders to what had been forecast years and years earlier, the actual number was 25% of what had been forecast. 1 out of every 4 that they said would show up actually showed up to ride rail. And finally, and most importantly, Rail has been sold, and according to your website, continues to be sold on the basis of it reducing traffic congestion. That is totally misleading. The environmental impact statement makes clear that traffic congestion in the future with rail in the year 2030 is projected to be 21% worse than it is right now. You say, well, how could that be? Well, they're comparing it to what traffic congestion in 2030 would be if absolutely nothing is done between now and then to reduce traffic congestion. Well, if you spend $10 billion on rail, you're not going to be able to do anything else to reduce traffic congestion. If you would cut your losses now and spend $1 billion or $2 billion on traffic congestion relief measures, then you could have less traffic congestion in the future than what we have today, as opposed to what your own EIS says will be 21% worse in the future than what it is today. On your website right now, it says, is rail transit going to make a difference in traffic congestion? And your answer says, yeah, if you know what traffic is like when UH and private schools are out for the summer, you have an idea of the difference rail will make. You're giving the impression that traffic congestion in the future will be that much less than what it is right now. The truth is, if nothing is spent on anything else to reduce traffic congestion, if everything is spent on rail, your own environmental impact statement makes clear traffic congestion will be 21% worse in the year 2030 than what it is right now. I just ask, as you evaluate
Mr.
these
Chair,
decisions
point of
you have to
order.
make, I just ask that you be more honest with the public than what I believe you have been thus far.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to testify?
There is no mention in the operating funds about a sinking fund to take care of future replacement and refurbishing. The the FTA recommends, doesn't mandate, but it recommends that every city set up a sinking fund to take care of future problems. And that's arisen because of the surveys they've done of the shortfall in refurbishing and replacement in the nation's transit systems, which are, they released a study yesterday showing that there's a $90 billion shortfall. And that's why you get all these stories of, in Washington, D.C., for example, of the cars breaking down and the elevators breaking down and having to substitute bus service for it, and in other cities as well. It would seem to me prudent that the city set up a sinking fund, because the fact is that, as a rough rule of thumb, over the life of the system, you spend as much money on replacement and refurbishing, and I'm not talking about just maintenance, but replacement and refurbishing of rails, cars, everything. You spend as much in all that over the life of the system as it costs to build in the first place. So I've calculated, and you run your own calculation. My calculation was that you should set aside at least $100 billion a year to take care of that future costs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other ones wishing to?
Thank you, Natalie Iwasa, for the record. Before you pass this resolution, I ask that you add a whereas clause, and I think it's very important. The HART submitted the budget to the mayor in accordance with the charter, and then the council passed the budgets with no cuts, unfortunately, but I think it's really important to include that as part of the resolution. With respect to the PR, I appreciate Amber Shin's comments, because it is overstated and there is waste. You guys had an event in Aina Library for kids, for families. We don't need that. Maybe down the road when the fares are out and we need to know how to transfer from bus to rail. But come on, rail is not out there and it's not going to be. So let's not spend money on that kind of thing. And with respect to trying to get information and educate the public, I think you need to recognize that it's equally important to be transparent about the whole thing and provide honest information, because that simply is not happening even to this date. I do appreciate the current board members, but it's still not happening. And for example, on the Facebook, a few months ago, comments were put on there by people who were concerned about rail, and some of those comments were deleted. Now that is not being transparent. That is not allowing the public to see what other people think, what other people might have other information about rail, and that's wrong. And so we're paying people presumably to maintain the Facebook page. And these are issues I think that you need to consider when you're talking about how much you're going to pay for the public relations. There was a monthly ad in the Star Advertiser that was coming out. That was pulled, and I'm happy to see that because that never had correct information on it. And with respect to support, overall, I think the other thing that's really important to recognize is that, if I may, just a minute or so, is that, you know, a lot of people have given up. They have said, I can't do anything about it. This is going to go on no matter what I say, no matter what anybody else does. It's just going to be rammed through, and why should I even bother providing feedback? That's where a lot of people are at from what I've seen in comments, from my talking to people that I work with, that I interact with. They've simply given up. That doesn't mean that we should continue pushing through with the costs and try to get this done all the way to Ala Moana. We're funding this with a regressive tax, and the legislature is going to consider something. Who knows? It could be a 5% GT. It could be some combination of TAT. We don't know. But I ask you to seriously look at other options. And yeah, you know, you've heard me many times, many of you, and I'm just really frustrated because I don't see how we can continue going as we have been. And then on top of it, try to pay $100 million or more in the operations and maintenance and try to keep this city going. You know, at some point, it's just going to break apart because people are having a hard time making ends meet. So I ask you to seriously consider that and look at that in your own discussions publicly, you know, with your friends, experts that you know. These are valid concerns that people are raising, and I don't think we've been, they've seriously been looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to testify? If not, on the table is Resolution 2017-7, adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2018, and that is just for the fiscal year 2018 itself. Can I get a motion?
Move approval.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any more discussion, board? If not, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Moving to item number 7, Resolution 2017-5, relating to the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation's request to the Honolulu City Council for approval of the insurance and sale of general obligation bonds. Robert?
Good morning, board members. This resolution is asking for the board's approval for up to, not to exceed $350 million in bond sales. And the bond sales are going to be done on behalf of HART by the City and County of Honolulu. One item I do want to bring up in the resolution is on the second page, item number 4. In the fiscal year, in a resolution that was passed by the board in
Robert,
previous...
I don't think we have an item number 4.
I think the copy got submitted.
There's supposed to be like a page
There's a page.
2 or something.
I apologize. I was thinking of another resolution, so it has nothing to do with it. So anyway, this resolution is really to ask for the board's approval for the sale of up to $350 million in bonds.
Okay. Board members, any question?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Chair. This resolution prompted a lot of discussion in my first meeting here, and the primary reason that there was some discussion was the wisdom of the variable rate and whether or not you could use longer-term funding. And one of the questions I asked at the time was whether or not it was connected in any way to the length of time that the GET would be funding rail. And I'm going to ask that question again because, so two questions, sorry. So the first one is variable rate versus a longer-term funding, and two, whether or not that funding and the ability to get the best deal possible, I guess I should say in terms of interest rates, is connected to the finiteness of the GET funding.
Right, yeah, good question, Director. Yeah, that's correct. In the last meeting, I mentioned that one of the products that we're looking at is variable bonds. And the question was raised, how come we're not considering fixed rate bonds? So I gave one answer. I should have gave a few more answers to the question. One of the answers, obviously, as of now, the interest rate on variable rate bonds is lower than fixed rate bonds. So we thought that there would be some kind of monetary advantage in going with variable rate bonds. The other thing I did not mention is that because of the uncertainty in funding beyond 2027, one of the things we're looking at is to get a fixed rate bond of 10 years or beyond. One of the features that the city would like to see in a fixed rate bond is what they call the callable option. Because of the shorter duration of the fixed rate bond period, it might be a little bit more expensive to have a callable option on a fixed rate bond that has a shorter duration. So that's one of the considerations. One of the things we consider to maybe not consider fixed rate bonds. So those are really three main reasons: the interest rate, the duration of our funding, which doesn't go beyond 2027, and the callable provision of a fixed rate bond, which may carry a premium charge if the duration is less than 10 years, the callable provision.
I think, Chair, we do have city of PFS here. I think maybe they can answer some questions for you.
Okay. I have Peter Biggs, the Deputy Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, and Wayne Fujita, City Treasurer.
Okay.
So I think Robert has explained it quite well. The variable rate bonds offer optionality so that they can be called within a 10-year period, and to issue 10-year bonds with a callable provision would in fact be quite expensive. And so given that our revenue stream is now only assured for the next 10 years, we felt it prudent to go, given the situation we're in now, with a bond that could be called, and then if we have a more permanent revenue stream, issued for a longer term period.
Okay.
With the variable rate, can the city also do interest rate swaps to fix the rate at some point as the rates start to go up?
That's correct. We would have that flexibility, but the first concern is to have an extended maturity term. And I guess, and based on the recent discussions in the media, that the state is planning to have special sessions, and we are hopeful that the result of that is an extension of the term, which would allow us to extend this maturity and get a much better deal. So this proposal for the variable rate would be for a 3-year term, but at any time it can be replaced or refunded.
So what's the, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So what's the timing, because the legislature has not identified the date of the special session? So given the timing of when we would need the funds and the length of time it takes to execute on the bond, we'd have to pull the trigger on what we're going to issue, or what the city's going to issue by what date.
Thank you. We already have structured the bonds with our existing the bond underwriters, and we are planning to have bond rating presentations in the beginning of August. And but even if the state has not at the time extended the taxes, we feel at this point in the stage of development of the HART construction, we would be doing the variable rate even if it was extended at this point.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to clarify, because I think this is an important point, you're going out for $350 million in bond financing to deal with the cash flow issues. It's not like you're asking for new money. It's not like a capital program where you go out and say, okay, we're going to do this, so we're going to raise money. This is not raising money. It's only dealing with the cash flow, that you're not getting the federal and GET money in the door in a timely manner of when you're going to spend the money to build whatever rail that you're building. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Any more questions, board?
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank the participants for engaging us in the briefings, and I'm satisfied. I asked a lot of questions. Glenn was the participant in my briefing, and he had some good questions too. So my lack of asking questions now is not a reflection of a lack of curiosity or interest in the subject matter. I just had all my questions adequately answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you. Is there any public testimony at this time? Yes, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record. Sorry I missed part of that discussion, and I hope my questions are not duplicative of what was already discussed. With respect to the $350 million, I think you're all aware that the budget that was passed by the City Council had about $200 million from bonding. And so I think it's important to have somebody explain why you would be going out for more bonds now rather than what the budget is allowing for or indicating. The other two more points. You know, I've watched the numbers very carefully, and with respect to cash flows and the proceeds and bond repayment, I've noticed in the cash flow that was presented to the board for the budget is different than what went out to the FTA. And so I'm sorry I didn't get that to you before the meeting, but I will send that to you because I think it's really important. I mean, we need to have consistent numbers, and if they're not going to be consistent, there has to be an explanation, and we should be given that information. Why are they not the same? What assumptions are different? And then the other thing I wanted to mention is with respect to the interest and the whole plan for these bonds. The budget that you just passed includes $12 million for interest. There was another document that went out not too long ago. I can't remember if it was with the FTA or if it was another separate thing that came to the board, but that included only $10.5 million in interest and finance costs. And again, so why is there a difference of $1.5 million? Even if you take the bond, I don't have the calculation in front of me, but the amount that is put in the budget is higher. So, you know, I keep finding these inconsistencies, and I don't know why they keep occurring. it's just very frustrating. So I will be sure to send that to you so you can take a look at that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Any
can
questions?
I respond to
Yes,
the
go ahead.
speakers? The $200 million that the city council passed was part of the city's capital budget. It had nothing to do with rail. So they will be, assuming this resolution passes today, this will be presented to the city council for approval for the rail bonds. So it's not the 200, that was a miscommunication or whatever, which I read in the media as well. And when I read it, I kind of wondered about that, but it isn't.
Well, what I'm referring to is the CIP budget. I think it was Bill 33 that the city just adopted, and you know, they specify the funding for each. And it was about $200 million that was from GEO bonds.
But that was for the city's capital program, the city's capital projects, not for rail.
It was in the HART CIP budget, though. It was not in the city CIP budget.
Well, that's not what I understood. I asked the same question.
Okay, so I will be sure to include that with you so I clarify
great.
exactly what I'm talking about.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're all aware that 2 weeks ago the City Council met to discuss whether or not and ended up passing their resolution to authorize the issuance of these bonds. It was the first City Council meeting that I've ever attended, and it was fascinating to me that at least one of the council members obviously didn't understand the difference between who pays a tax and who bears the burden of that tax. It's an extremely important concept, certainly for decision makers like you. It became clear he didn't understand this because he was talking about what a terrible, terrible burden it would be to raise hundreds of millions of dollars a year using the property tax, but then it's, you know, much, much, much less of a burden when you raise the exact same amount of money using the general excise tax. And what this confuses, of course, is that the general excise tax is literally a business tax. Some of it, not most of it, some of it gets passed on to the consumer at the point of sale, but most of it just gets baked into the cost of goods and services on Hawaii. If you're a renter and your landlord's property taxes go up by $1,000 and your landlord increases your rent by $800, then the landlord has paid the $1,000 new tax, but $800 of that has been borne by the renter. Again, very important concept. I started out my professional life as a certified public accountant. I have an advanced law degree in taxation. I practice as a tax lawyer. I've taught at the college and law school level for 47 years. I understand how this works. It's really, really fundamental for decision makers like you. And so I'm saying to myself, how could that city council person not understand this terribly important basic concept? And then I looked at your website. And in fact, I looked at your handout at the front door, and HART is the one that has been telling the public that what matters is who pays the tax. They look at the half penny per dollar at the point of sale on the rail surtax using the excise tax, and they pretend, they communicate to the public that that's the extent of the burden, and it's simply not. And it's intellectually dishonest to continue telling the public that the burden of the general excise tax for any $1 is any different than what would be for the property tax. The export rate, the portion of taxes that get borne by non-residents, is roughly the same with the property tax as it is the general excise tax. The State Tax Review Commission has studied this time and time again. And while their estimates sometimes vary a little bit, over many decades, they have concluded the export rate is basically the same. So the burden to residents of funding rail with the property tax is no greater, no less than what the burden is funding it with the general excise tax. And I would encourage you to be a little bit more honest with the public about that fact, not opinion, that fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick question?
Oh, yes, please do.
You talked about that $1,000, if it was raised, that the owner would pass it down to the renter, you said, and you gave an example of 800 and that the renter would pay. And then what did you say that?
Right, and what I'm saying on any tax, my example involved the property tax, but on any tax, if you're trying to figure out what's the impact of this tax on real people, you don't look to see who initially pays it. You take it the next step to who bears the burden of that tax. So for example, most excise taxes are literally incurred by and paid by businesses. And yet they pass that on in a variety of ways. Most of it they pass on in the form of increased cost of goods and services provided in Hawaii, but some of it gets passed on in the form of less jobs. They don't hire as many people.
Well, you talked about, I just want to clarify, because you said it's $1,000, would be example of an increase. 800 would be borne by the renter.
In my example.
The business would only incur $200, or not 1,000. I think you said $1,000 that they're incurring. They're not incurring the 2,000 because they pass it on the 800
in my example,
to the renter, right?
The payer of the tax paid 1,000.
Well, he got the 800. He paid 200. 800 was borne by the tenant.
Yes.
So, okay,
yes.
Thank you.
So the net impact to the landlord in my example was $200. So people who study taxes, this is a tax policy issue, would describe in that example the landlord as having borne $200 of the $1,000 tax and the tenant having borne the burden of $800.
Thank you.
Professor Roth, I've heard repeatedly that the general excise tax is a regressive tax. And to your point, the burden of who bears an increase in the general excise tax is passed through with increased costs of goods and services and the like. Is that based on a study that was done here in Hawaii that looked at our excise tax, our general excise tax?
Yeah, in fact, there have been a number of studies. I was on the State Tax Review Commission some years ago. We studied it in depth then, but it's been studied several times since. Every single study, without exception, has concluded that Hawaii's general excise tax is one of the most regressive taxes, not by far in Hawaii, but one of the most regressive taxes anywhere. The word regressive basically means, and it's not a simple concept, but what it means is that the burden on low-income and middle-income people is significantly greater than the burden on high-income people. So if the decision makers were wanting to go easy on low and middle income people and have a disproportionate share paid by high income people, they would not use a regressive tax. The excise tax is notoriously regressive. There is no disagreement among experts at all. It's notoriously regressive. The property tax in Hawaii, by comparison, is either moderately regressive or some experts argue that it's slightly progressive. The income tax, of course, is progressive. That's its basic design. The point, of course, is that if one goal is fairness, fairness meaning you don't make it disproportionately burdensome on low and middle income people, then the last tax you would use to pay for rail or anything else would be the excise tax.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The only observation I would make, Professor, is that, this body does not dictate how this project is to be funded through taxes. And I know you've testified before the legislature and so on. But to the extent that we're disseminating dishonest information, I think that's a public disservice, and so I would encourage our executive director to look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on it, and not to beat this dead horse because it's been the subject of lots of discussion, Mr. Roth, but part of, I thought, what the burden of the GET was because it's borne by visitors as opposed to residents, and that's why the comment of burden is directed to the fact that, and I don't remember what the percentage that's been talked about.
Roughly 1/3.
1/3 is paid by visitors.
Well, the burden is borne by visitors. They actually pay about 14.7%.
Okay. So I think that's what is meant. I may be wrong, but I think that's what it's meant, and that's the way I look at it when I look at the GET. Even though I agree with you, it is regressive, and unlike a sales tax. Even in California, even it's 9.5%, but it doesn't affect medical services, food, things like that, which is where lower income, middle income people are most affected. So
One of the experts for the Tax Review Commission said that if we were to replace our 4% general excise tax with a conventional sales tax, in order to raise the same amount of money, that sales tax rate would have to be 11% right now. So the point is, it's much more powerful than what on its face it appears to be. But as Ms. Kim Shim has pointed out, it's very, very important. The city over the years has emphasized that roughly a third of the general excise tax is borne by non-residents. And I think that's pretty accurate with respect to the studies that have been done. But that's true with respect to the property tax. And in fact, the income tax is substantial. It's not that high. But the point is, there isn't any built-in policy advantage to using the general excise tax as opposed to something else. Now, don't get me wrong. As you all know, I was against rail from the beginning, and I'm not encouraging you to simply use a different tax or what have you. And I understand that you're not in control of taxes, but I very much appreciate your recognition that you do control the literature that you make available on the website and at the door. And I appreciate that you're going to revisit that and do what you can to make it as accurate as it can possibly be.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, I admire the public service of people like you that come to these meetings and you do the work and wanting to sit on more committees and asking terrific questions and offering to take a look at things that people like me are pointing out need to have a look at. So again, this is my first meeting. I appreciate this opportunity, and I thank you for your willingness to spend your valuable time on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the idea that you not have an audit. As a businessman, and as all businessmen look upon audits and accounting in general as a historical record, one, but also as something that unearths where things are wrong. And if, for example, you had a forensic
Mr. Slater, we're not talking about an audit issue on this one. We're just taking testimony regarding the GEO bonds. Do you have anything to talk about on the GEO bonds to testify?
No, but let me just finish up with one thing, just saying that if you had a forensic audit to find out what has happened to double, okay, we've gone from a $5 billion thing to a $10 billion, and you don't know how. You don't know why. If you had a forensic audit, you could find out precisely why things have gone wrong, okay, and learn from it and go forward with it. If rail is going to be an inevitable, at least you should know what problems to eliminate going forward.
Okay, thank you. Again, anyone wishing to testify regarding Resolution 2017 relating to the issuance of the general obligations bond?
Thank you, Chair, and distinguished member of the HART Board. For the record, Russell Homa. Just wanted to talk a little bit about being a former economic researcher as well, wearing different hats. So being a senior official for the APEC master plan here. So, thank God that I did propose my APEC master plan. Ever since that, we've been having this robustity economy in Hawaii. As you know, we have a $1 billion of surplus that our governor is pretty happy about it. If we maintain our status quo, we'll probably have another $1 billion of trade surplus or in terms of revenue. But you just got to make sure that you got to streamline the cost. What industries that we have? As you know, tourism is our #1 industry here. And we're seeing, Hawaiian Airlines are so happy that they're getting more international routing as well. We got more destination. People are coming here throughout mainland as well from the Asia Pacific region. They think Hawaii is the hub the gateway of Asia Pacific. So we are maintaining things as well, but we want to maintain our quality of control, quality of life here for our residents. And as you know, where the cost of living is so high here, and we got to maintain good quality jobs to sustain our next keiki of next generation, so they can maintain and live and work and play in Hawaii. So you just got to kind of look into the industry. As you know, military is doing good. Our construction industry is doing good.
Mr. Hanma, thank you
Military is part
again,
of the-
but this is regarding the geo bonds.
Yes,
This hasn't,
so I'm just saying the legislature is going to come up with the funding mechanism this special session. They are looking to the tax revenues based on the Revenues Council's projections and how we're going to maintain our quality of life here, funding this project as well. So those funding mechanisms going to be based on the tax revenues, not only from excise tax, but all kinds of measures, so that we can sustain our project and proceed.
thank you. Any other testimonies? If not, Resolution 2017-5 relating to, I'm sorry, wait. Yeah, the general obligation bonds. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any more discussion, board? If not, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Are those opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to agenda number 8, resolution number 2017-6, authorizing the acquisition of a fee simple interest, temporary construction easements, and a permanent utility easement in the real property identified as tax map keys 1-2-013-020 and 1-2-013-021, portions located at 2323 and 2339 Kamehameha Highway, Honolulu, Hawaii 96819, and owned by First Hawaiian Bank by eminent domain. Abby?
Oh, Chair, before we begin, I don't know if we have to disclose, I mean, I have a account at First Hawaiian Bank, checking and savings account. I don't know if that disqualifies me or a conflict of interest, but we got a notice that we should disclose whatever.
Okay. And like I think the last time this came up, there's many of us, so we'll have court counsel weigh in on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry. Deputy Corporation Counsel Randall Ishikawa. Yes, we had sent out the notice that if there are interests that amount to a financial interest that would impair your ability to participate in the matter, then it would be something that should be disclosed, and recusal was an option. The forms are provided by the City Ethics Commission that can be used to get their opinion on it. The general rule, and in fact, the rule on this I'm sorry. How's that email that you sent? Oh, sorry. That if the board member has a direct personal financial interest in the subject matter of the motion, they may abstain after the disclosure. The financial interest is an ownership interest, a creditor interest in an insolvent business, and employment or prospective employment for which negotiations have begun, ownership interest in real or personal property, loan or debtor interest, or directorship or officership in a business. Now, in that case, it is what basically, if the action taking affects your financial interest in the entity or your ownership interest, then that is something that would be grounds for recusal. If it is not, if the action on this particular item does not affect your financial interest, then that is something that you may want to disclose, but would not disqualify you from voting on it.
Okay. So with that being said, Anybody got questions to him, just to make sure? So not necessarily having a banking account there would stop us from taking a vote.
No, that would not. That because the action on the, I guess, the acquisition in this, or the eminent domain matter, probably would not affect your bank account or something of that sort. But if you have an ownership interest in the bank or the parent company of the bank, that may have some impact.
Correct. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
With that being said,
do we still need to disclose, though, even if it does not affect our decision?
Yeah, in an abundance of caution, you could disclose
Yes.
and advise what interests and indicate as to whether it would or would not affect the financial interests.
Okay.
Well, I have checking and savings accounts. I don't think it affects this issue or anything that the bank does operationally. I have mutual funds that could own shares in First Hawaiian Bank, but I don't control what they
buy.
do and what
Correct.
they buy, so.
Okay. Anybody else as we go around?
I have a safety deposit box, but it's not located at the site.
Okay.
Yeah, checking and credit accounts at First Hawaiian, but it not affect my decision.
Okay.
None.
I have bank accounts, mortgage with First Hawaiian Bank, credit cards and the like. The other disclosure is I am personal friends with a few of the senior management people at the bank and a few directors. Bob Harrison, who's the chairman and CEO, is a very old friend, and I've done some legal work for him. But notwithstanding all that, I don't think it'll affect my ability to participate on this decision.
Okay.
None.
None.
Okay. And for me, I do have some accounts as well, checking and savings over there. So, but shouldn't affect anything we do today. So with that, Abby.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members. Abby Mayer, HART's Director of Planning, Permitting, and Right-of-Way. Thanks for your consideration of this matter. If you'll recall, at least those of you who were here, to the new members who are not here, I was here before you in April on this same matter. At the time, I announced that we had continued to negotiate with First Hawaiian Bank, and given the timeline of the matter, we were seeking pre-authorization for eminent domain out of an abundance of caution should negotiations fail. I am happy to announce that late last week on Friday, we reached an agreement in principle verbally with First Hawaiian Bank. We're in the process of drafting the subsequent agreements related to that understanding now. Once those agreements are signed, they'll be forwarded to the FTA for concurrence and approval. So I'm here before you today, continuing the last step of pre-authorization on this matter. Again, just in an abundance of caution, should the agreement reached either fall apart between the parties or not be concurred upon by the FTA, we would have this option remaining to us should all else fail. So the timeline is presented to you as a reminder. Again, notice to proceed this, the two TMKs are in the airport segment. They're our last acquisitions in airport segment. Notice to proceed was given on December 1st. We were here in April, on April 20th, for our first pre-authorization resolution, which was forwarded to City Council. On June 7th, earlier this month, City Council passed a resolution authorizing eminent domain on this properties. And so we're here for a resolution from you authorizing staff to file the eminent domain complaint. Again, as a reminder, we're looking at the Middle Street station now. The two properties are in the lower part of the diagram, lots 20 and 21. Majority of these easements that you'll see fall within the smaller lot, the lot 21 that fronts Kamehameha Highway and Dillingham Boulevard. You'll see in green the station facility, the pedestrian overpass that connects to Middle Street Transit Center. As a reminder, although the station is on the Mackay side of the highway, there'll be no pedestrian touchdown on the Mackay side. So all the pedestrians embarking or disembarking at Middle Street will have to use that pedestrian overpass and access through the Middle Street Transit Center. Dark blue is the guideway, of course. Again, the history of this property has been quite complex. In the original EIS, the right-of-way plan recommended a full take, the impact of which would have been extremely severe. This is a big facility for the bank, secure data processing center. So we worked over the years. There's actually been 15 individual revisions to the need lines in conjunction with sewer and HECO utility easements to really do the best job we can at narrowing the footprint that we need for purposes of the project. This is the conglomeration of easements. I'll quickly go through each one and break it down individually, but what you see up here represents kind of the sum total of all the easements that we need. There's also a small fee take, only 75 square feet, which will become part of the widened Dillingham Boulevard, and two small temporary construction easements. They're labeled inside that conglomeration there. So beginning with easement B, it's a subsurface sewer easement. Easement F is the first of two temporary construction easements. Easement G is the second of two temporary construction easements. Easement A is for access and utility, primarily HECO. Easement X is a submerged portion of Easement E. It's in Kalihi Stream. As you probably recall, there's going to be one guideway column placed in Kalihi Stream itself. So the submerged easement is required for that. Easement D is a storm drain easement. You'll see a photo of that. It's adjacent to the fee take later in the presentation. Easement H is an access easement on behalf of HART. You'll see easement J coming a couple slides from now, which is identical to this. One is on behalf of HECO and the other is on behalf of HART. And easement I is a continuation of access. And there's that repeated easement J, identical to easement H, just in favor of a different party. Our fee take, the 75 square feet, it's represented in yellow. It's that small island of sidewalk circled in the photograph on your right. Again, once Dillingham Boulevard is widened, that will become part of the roadway. It's outside the fence line for First Hawaiian Bank. So there was no need to leave that in easement. That this utility is going to be complete for that small portion. And then easement E is our major station guideway and maintenance easement. It overlaps with a lot of the easements you've already seen, but this will be for, again, our guideway station and maintenance purposes. Some statistics. Again, the fee take is 75 square feet. The easements in total, there are 8 of them, 41,786 square feet, bringing the total acquisition up to just under 42,000 square feet. 2 temporary construction easements totaling 4,311 square feet. Our appraisal was completed December 21st of 2016. Received FTA concurrence on that appraisal amount on March 10th of this year, followed shortly by an offer, And then the latest action after the April board approval of the first pre-authorization resolution, City Council approved Resolution 17-121 on June 7th. And that completes my presentation. Certainly be glad to answer any questions.
Great. So Abby, how far apart are you in your negotiations with the bank?
We have reached an agreement verbally, so we're writing it up now. It will be sent to FTA for approval, and assuming all that goes smoothly, we won't need the authorization that's acted upon today. So we're happy to report that, and certainly to avoid litigation, in this case or in any case, is advantageous. So.
Any other questions, board? And again, this is just to make sure we keep the ball rolling, with construction and not holding up anything as we go along, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If for some reason the agreement we reach doesn't get finalized, this would be a plan B or C option for gaining access to these areas and to prevent any delays on construction.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item? Okay.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record. Just a couple comments. And checking accounts and savings accounts, I think are just really, I appreciate the comments, but I don't think they really would impact a decision such as this. But my question is, what cost are we looking at here? I mean, the resolution here states that the estimated cost is in the budget, but it's really hard for us to evaluate this when we don't know what the potential cost is. And my concern is that, the former HART chair was CEO of First Hawaiian Bank, and although he's not here anymore, this has been going on for some time, and so how can we be assured that it's all on the up and up? So I just ask you to, if the HART can mention the estimated cost, I think that would be beneficial.
Okay, thank you. If I'm not mistaken, Abby, we haven't had it for a while, but I think at the next board meeting, an update on all our real estate that we have up to date.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Certainly, specifics on this or any negotiations we keep confidential. We present the right-of-way budget as a whole and track as a whole, and don't release estimates parcel by parcel, but certainly we can get you updated on where we stand right-of-way budget and progress so far.
Okay, thank you.
And Abby, if you could just explain why, as a matter of policy, we keep that information confidential, just so for the benefit of the public.
Sure. We're acutely aware that as we take land needed for this project, we are impacting people's lives, businesses, properties that have been owned in a lot of cases for decades or generations. So we try to approach that with the utmost sensitivity for the private parties who we're interacting with. Additionally, releasing, let's say, a TMK by TMK estimate of what we assume costs would not be appropriate in any kind of set of negotiations. So we present as a whole and our progress as a whole within the corridor, and that's basically how we've approached it.
Right, and at the end of all of this, FDA has to approve it as well too, right?
FDA has to concur. If they do not concur, then we'd have to go back to the drawing board. And if this, for example, went to eminent domain, then the value all the way through the process with an ultimate value would be set by a jury. So looking at all the different appraisal information that's presented in the court setting in that sense.
All right, thank you. Any other further questions? No? Any other public testimony on this item? Hearing none. Resolution 2017-6, authorizing the acquisition Can I get a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 9, change orders. Kainani?
Short. Aloha, Kainani Kraut. I'm the West Side Construction Manager.
John Moore, East Side Construction Manager. Good morning.
I'm presenting the KHG impediment mitigation change. It is a credit, rather complicated, so I'm going to go slide by slide, and if we have questions, please stop me. Basically, the purpose of this change at HART's discretion was to delete part of the civil work in order to mitigate costs associated with impediments that were experienced during guideway construction. We're also working to minimize any duplication of work due to the upcoming 138 undergrounding within that same corridor. And we're compensating the design builder for additional supervision costs that were incurred due to these delays, settling those costs and delays, and extending the substantial completion for full and final completion of the KHG guideway segment. The credit is $6,550,000, and it is a bilateral agreement with Kiewit. So some of the impediments that were experienced originally the contract had the road work to be widened, and then the guideway was supposed to be constructed. So that way we would be maintaining the lanes and allowing the traveling public to proceed. Unfortunately, that is not the way the project continued. Right at the beginning of the corridor in the Urban Garden area between Acacia and Waimanu Home Road, there were right-of-way acquisition and right-of-entry issues. So that prevented Kiewit from widening the road at the very beginning of the project. In the fall of 2015, we also had about 33 outstanding utility relocations that were preventing the widening work from occurring. At that time, Kiewit decided to, as is their fiduciary responsibility to the owner, they decided to mitigate the delays and start the column construction along KHG, do the guideway construction, and then come back to do the civil work. To expand a little bit on the utility relocations, they were between Hawaiian Tel, HECO, and Oceanic, and HART is currently evaluating whether we can recover these costs from the third parties. And some of you are aware of the traffic signal changes that occurred with HDOT. They are reimbursing us for those construction costs, but those were one of the issues that prevented the widening work from occurring at the very beginning. So Kiewit began with the construction of the guideway and the columns down the middle of the road, and now we're at the point where in the phases where the widening could occur, it had. You'll probably see that within the corridor, and they are working on a wall at Waimalu Shopping Center where they'll widen that segment. So we looked at the corridor and tried to find the areas where Kiewit could proceed with widening, and this is about de-scoping the other areas so that we can more effectively manage the project, minimize the duplication, and also proceed with station construction. So that was another issue that we faced as the guideway was proceeding. The NTPs for the station contractors, the award, the bid, that whole process was proceeding. So around Pro Ridge Station, where you're at Anna Miller's, Territorial Savings, and the Best Buy area, the station contractors, in order to prevent their delays, they're going to be working right in the road. So if you've been in Farrington Highway, where at Westlock, all of the construction's right in the middle of the road, that interface with the station would have prevented Kiewit from being able to effectively finish the civil work in that area.
So again, looking at the interface with the stations, we were looking at the schedule, comparing that to Guideway, seeing where the station work was going to conflict with the civil work, and decided in those areas where we have overlap or interface that we would have to descope the work to allow the stations to proceed so that the Guideway and the core systems and all of those contracts could proceed and better, take a second look at how we would actually execute the civil work. So in about fall of 2016, we actually issued a request for change from the contractor to descope the station areas only. And through this kind of negotiation and look at the work, Kiewit came back and basically said, well, why don't you take all of it? And that kind of began this back and forth discussion with Kiewit to proceed and try to figure out how best to execute this work without holding up the other contracts that HART has already engaged in. So this is the interface with the stations. The last piece that kind of fell in our lap in a draft report in December of 2016 was the 138 undergrounding, which HECO and our team looked at and saw that as the best way to mitigate the clearance issues with the 138 in this area. That's between Wai'au and Aloha Stadium, the same place where we're doing this civil work. So right now, procurement is underway for the designer. So once that designer is on board, we have a preliminary alignment, and strangely enough, it goes back and forth along this corridor from the westbound to the eastbound. There are vaults for the 138. They're approximately 20 by 10 feet large that will be going underground. And so not quite understanding where that would happen and how that would happen was another factor in looking at how we can best mitigate duplication of work. We also are planning on doing some intermittent or interim paving repairs because we know that the state of that pavement is not in good shape, and we're actually actively working with DOT on full depth repairs. So originally we were only doing a 3-inch overlay, and the base, where if you're out there some of the potholes are deeper than 3 inches, was not going to be repaired. So we are working with DOT on a 16-inch repair on the pavement areas that are really bad, and they've already committed to pay for the areas that that they're kind of working with us on. So I feel like in the end we're going to get a better pavement. It will take a little bit longer, especially with the 138 undergrounding that's proceeding, but once we're done, hopefully the pavement will last, 7 to 10 years rather than the potholes popping up immediately afterwards. We do own the plans, so the Kiewit work did not go, unrecognized. We are working, again, with procurement to repackage that, and we'll be putting out a separate package as we get more of the details to finalize this work in this plan. We felt like, again, the civil work wasn't affecting the Guideway, and so it would be a good way to kind of mitigate costs and execute the work once we know all the impediments were out of the way. We've been working with On-Call, and at Urban Gardens, we're still having an issue with the right of entry that we're working through. So it just felt like it was a little bit more conscientious way to execute the work and minimize duplication. I wanted to break down the costs so that everybody understood, even though this is a credit and we are settling the additional supervision, the work will have to be done. And again, we're working with DOT on the full depth repair costs, and any costs associated with executing this work is within our contingency for KHG Guideway currently. So we will have the funds to execute it. We have estimated, so let me go through this real quick. We descoped the mill, basically when you take the pavement down, you scrape off the pavement, and then you're overlaying the pavement. That's the 3-inch paving, the striping and the signage, because the widening is taking from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, so the striping and signage, all that changes. So that was descoped. There was a change order for Cutter Dodge. Right now we are working with DPP on some of the legacy issues with Cutter Dodge in that area. So that's still ongoing and still needs to be worked through. So rather than having Kiewit execute that, we de-scoped it. The widening work in the various phases was de-scoped. The insulated joints at stations de-scoped. And then there was irrigation landscaping in the medians. All of that was de-scoped. Including the markups, our total for the civil work was $12,390,000. So that's for all the roadway work we're talking about. The extended supervision, again, that's in there, that's settling the time between the original substantial completion date, which was September 16 of 16. We ended up giving them a time extension to do the traffic signal work with no money. And so this is settling all the time associated with the extensions that we've given them. The costs were through July because they have been delaying themselves in executing the civil work, and they recognize their own delay. So we didn't pay for all the way to September, even though our time impact showed that the extension is appropriate till September 30th of 2017. So that should be full and final, and their completion date and Kiewit should be out of the road. So the total aggregate cost is $6,550,000. So again, we like to share some of the cost analysis and things that occurred during the changes. During the negotiation with Kiewit, we were using actual DOT historic bids. They were using, their own numbers, so that reduced some of the costs by 18%. HART's position, again, I mentioned, was that they had self-imposed delays and inefficiencies in executing the civil and traffic signal work, so we felt like the full-time extension was not on us. That reduced the cost approximately 8%. There is a retaining wall, a rather large retaining wall by Waimalu Shopping Center near Shiro's across from Best Buy. They are executing the widening in that phase as well as the retaining wall. So that stayed in their contract. And the final negotiated time was 141 days and extended the time from May, because the previous time extension was to May 2017, from now until September 30th of 2017. So the requested action of the board is to approve the change order in a total credit amount of $6,550,000 to mitigate the impediments that were faced by the project.
Any questions?
Kanani, sorry, I was supposed to be in the briefing yesterday, and at the last minute I couldn't make it, so I apologize. But so this work that's being de-scoped, is it going to end up appearing in another contract somewhere else?
Yes.
And what do you estimate that to be?
So our estimate, including escalation, is about 14 to 15 million. So it's a little bit more than what we're showing here. Again, we're changing the scope a little bit. So within the project contingency that's shown in the budget that's in the monthly report, we have that cost covered. So again, even though it's a $6 million credit, that money can go to this project and we'll be covering the rest of the expenses. And the additional work that's being requested, or the full depth repaired requested by DOT, will be covered by their funds.
But in the absence of the change order, then we'd be spending $12 million that we shouldn't spend, because it's just a waste.
Well, it would be spent. Kiewit would execute it. Part of it would be undone by the 138. We would not have done the full depth repair, which means a 3-inch overlay may last 5 years. We may experience pavement issues very shortly because of, the way it was executed before. I feel like in the end we're going to get a better product for the traveling public. It's going to take a little bit longer, but we are trying to do an interim fix, a 1-inch in the areas where the 138 may intersect. So we won't do full depth repairs in that area, because when the 138 comes through, they'll be doing that work in conjunction with undergrounding the utility.
And you folks have carefully assessed whether or not, we could use that new truck equipment and lifts that we're using.
Yes.
It doesn't work in this area.
Correct. And that was part of the outcome of the draft report in December. So again, the beginning of this change really was the interface at the stations, because our stations couldn't put their false work up in the road if Kiewit was supposed to be paving in the road. So we had to eliminate that interface. And then it kind of grew. And then in December, when the draft 138 report came out and the preliminary alignment was shown between Wai'au and Aloha Stadium, it was, okay, do we do all of this work to rip it up in 5 years? Now realizing that we have to make sure it's rideable out there, that the pavement needs some care, and that's why we're working with DOT on what we can do in the interim. But not necessarily expending all of the funds and trying to do our due diligence and execute appropriately.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I'm sorry, you said it's going to be about 14 million
Mm-hmm.
to do the work that you're just scoping out? Okay.
Yes.
And you're not expecting to do this work anytime soon, so it's kind of far down the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And and you say the money, the $14 million is going to come out of the project contingency fund, which is already in our budget, right?
Correct.
Okay. When the project contingency fund, we're talking about the 8.2 billion, which is the current estimate for this project, and we had the project contingency fund out there, you must have known what things would be possibly tapped into. You couldn't come up with a number otherwise, right?
Correct.
Was that under consideration at
Yes.
that time?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not going to be taking away money from anything, because it's not an infinite pot of money, right?
Mm-hmm. So this was in our estimate for our project completion. So under our KHG line item, it is covered. It's not coming out of the larger project contingency. It's covered under my guideway contract.
It's what we call allocated contingency.
Got it.
They gave us that.
Got it.
So at the time the budget was being reworked, we looked at all of the risk factors that we had, and we attributed money to those risk factors so that we would ensure any of the risks that we saw, hoping we could mitigate or not realize them, we would get rid of, but we're carrying cost to cover those in a worst case scenario, so that our budget money,
And Kainani, this exercise is part of that more robust bottoms-up cost analysis that you guys embarked on.
Correct.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I think the public would appreciate it because, it's frustrating when you see them pave the road and then come back and dig it all up again and then repave it, and they consider it a waste of money in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I just want to make a comment on is I know you said Oceanic Time Warner Cable. In representing them, I think they're called Spectrum or Charter now, so they're touchy on this, so I want to,
Okay.
you might want to just reword that portion of
Okay.
it. So,
I don't know if our utility agreements were redone.
yeah. Anybody have any other questions? If not, is there any public testimony on this item? Mr. Hanma?
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Chair, for the record, Russell Homa. I guess on the change order as well with going through the alignment through, Meadow Street, finishing the project of the third alignment, which we gave it to CIMIC and Taylor and Grant. Following Kiewit, because Kiewit Pacific is pulling out of this project after their phase is over. So we're going to pass the torch to CIMIC and Taylor Grant to finish it as a general prime contractor. And they have their own little subcontractors. I just hope these subcontractors that was working under Kiewit will team up with CIMIC, because they already have the training and on-the-job training, and they know what the ramification is. So, because what's going to happen, we get this new contractor on board, and we go through the fourth phase from Middle Street to all the way down to Ala Moana Shopping Center. There's going to be tremendous amount of changeover and cost overruns, which the CIMIC has anticipated, which Kiewit already knows what those impacts are. So we just want to make sure that some of the information is passed on from Kiewit to CIMIC so that they know what the ramification and what to anticipate. And other thing is, this is a big concern. The precasting yard that I mentioned earlier about that Kiewit controls, are they going to be able to use that facility again, or CIMIC's going to come up with a new precasting yards, which is going to encumber more cost because they got to buy their own little equipment, machinery, tractors, bulldozers, or whatever machine equipment, which costs millions of dollars. And you don't want to offshore and duplicate the work. If they can use some of the Kiewit facilities, that'll probably bring the cost down as well. So you guys got to look into those kind of factors. Thank you very much.
So quickly, Murthy, can you just comment on the precast yard?
Yeah, the precast yard that Kiewit is using is going to be used by the airport contractor.
Okay, thank you.
We have already negotiated that.
Okay, any other questions? Any other public testimonies? If not, motion to accept the $6.55 million credit for KHG for Kiewit's impediment mitigation.
Move to approve.
Okay, do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Okay, item number B.
So just one last comment on that. Just to piggyback on Ember's comment, we are working to put out an IDIQ paving project. I am hoping that it'll go out this fall so that we can more expeditiously execute the work that's not in conflict with the 138.
Right.
So just so the public knows that's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the second change I have is for our construction, engineering, and inspection contract that is currently with PGH Wong. The purpose of this change is to increase the contract amount by $16 million for $54 million for the West Side CE&I work of the guideway and stations. This is an initial increase that is anticipated to cover services through FY 2018. We're currently evaluating how to execute these services, and staff will be back to the board to request the remainder of the funds for the remaining duration of construction. So a little bit of background, the PGH Wong contract was awarded in January of 2014. The scope included CE&I services from 2014 to 2020, which was to complete the contracts on the West. The anticipated funds to cover this scope was a very minimal scope. I'll talk about it in a little bit. The initial contract envisioned that the work would proceed sequentially, not at the same time. For instance, right now, guideway work is still going on while station work is occurring. Guideways were supposed to be complete and then stations, so the staffing was not anticipated to be what it was today. There was the initial contract for the stations that had one single 9-station package, and there are currently 3 separate design build packages that triples the staff that's needed to administer the contract. And then there, again, we've talked about some of the delays that were experienced that extends the time of the contracts and the needs for this service. So what happened again? There were right-of-way acquisition issues, right-of-entry issues for construction. We had third-party utilities, ignore the names, for the relocation work. Again, HART is currently evaluating whether we can recover costs from those parties. Project staff is also working to minimize the outstanding utility relocations that's preventing station work. Right now we have 2. We're very close to settling, so we should be through all of that on the West. There have been a greater number of anticipated submittals, RFIs, things like that, because as we presented in December, the packages that went out had a lot of unknowns and questions that needed to be answered. So we are experiencing a greater than normal number of RFIs and submittals. And then again, we had site access issues between the stations and the guideway contractor. So they occupy the same footprint, and because guideway was not totally done, the station contractors needed to come in to execute their work. Those were some of the delays that were experienced. During the initial contract, some of our assumptions, right now what I'm forecasting for a total contract cost through closeout, and that's minimal closeout, is between 80 and 90 million. That would require an additional 26 to 36 million. The current estimate represents 5% of construction costs, where the initial estimate was approximately 3% of construction costs. My experience in Hawaii for the Cypress project is closer to 5% rather than the 3%. Our current estimates include current staffing levels through project completion for the various projects with minimal staff for closeout. So we are trying to, I guess, minimize the cost, and I'm starting to cut back on closeout staff, which means it may protract that schedule, but we're doing the best we can to do all of it while maintaining cost. There is no, the increase in staffing levels for changes right now is anticipated due to some of the issues that we're having on the stations. That's not reflected in my current estimate. So we're working to understand our actual impacts due to the changes that we're experiencing. I also added in the forecast assistant PMs, which is being carried in the operating budget that Robert presented. And so that's part of not using all CE&I, but having redundancy in our HART staff and utilizing that position. So that's reflected in this current forecast. And my objective with the 138 and the HART parking, or the Highlands Parking Garage and Transit Center, would be to use mostly HART staff. Several of my PMs, assistant PMs, as we're wrapping up guideways, as we're wrapping up stations at that point, would be free to do this work. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to oversee those construction projects, and that's part of the assumptions that were made in the final estimate that I'm carrying. And this is also within the project budget, the CE&I contract cost, and we factor all this in. So it's covered in our current budget. So the impact of the change order, basically it was a $54.2 million contract. The proposed amendment is $16 million. That'll bring the total contract to $70.2 million. And these are time and material contracts, so you're paying for the actual costs that are incurred as we oversee, new staff that comes in, or approving other direct costs and things like that. So the requested action is to approve a change order for a total of $16 million to provide staffing through the end of the next fiscal year.
Okay. Just to give the new board members a history of this, is that originally the package came out to a 9-station package for one contractor to bid. And what was difficult about that is that the bonding itself that was required was too large. And so a lot of companies couldn't bid this project, and it most likely would have went to a mainland company. By packaging it at a 3-station package, it allowed more local contractors to bid and give a competitive bid, as opposed to just a large company trying to bid out this work. So the bonding issue, again, was too large, but it also cut down the time of the work itself, because they were going to, the original way, where I think was one station at a time, and as one completes, they start the next one. What they're doing now is all stations are being constructed at simultaneously moving, so it'll be a lot quicker in getting construction done in that case, yeah. So I guess it leads up to this point of now needing more oversight because of 9 going at once as opposed to 1 at a time. So, yes.
If you can say publicly, what is the markup on the time and materials?
It's a fixed fee contract. So it's a set percentage. Not sure if I can say the set percentage, but it is set. So we pay time and materials and a set percentage.
Right.
Now in the time and materials, they have their audited overhead, so that's included, and then they have, their fixed fee that they're going to get.
That set percentage, we've obviously determined. This was done on a procurement basis, competitive bid process, so it's market or less, right? That's correct.
Yeah, and it went through the procurement process and was vetted at that time.
Oh, sorry.
If I can ask a question too, the $16 million is a ceiling. It won't exceed that, right? I mean, this is it, and actually, on a time and materials basis, it's possible that it could be less. Is that right?
It is always possible, but not likely. This is only to carry us to the end of the next fiscal year, so it is not to the completion of the construction on the west. Again, what we're trying to do is compare the cost of carrying a consultant and HART staff, make those evaluations. Our current forecast through construction completion and closeout is between 80 and 90 million. So right now, this contract will be at 70 million. So there is a delta there. Again, depending on the need for changes, if we're doing documentation for recovering costs, we need more staff to do those things. If we're not doing that, we don't need as much staff. So it really goes to managing the staff that are in the field now and making sure we're doing that effectively. That's the time and materials part. But yeah, I hope I adequately answered that. So no is the response. It will exceed the 70 million. We will be back.
Okay, but for this portion that you described, 16 million is it?
That's it for now. To carry us till the end of July 2018. Construction through closeout will carry, we will have a need through 2020. And hoping to balance that between HART staff and CE&I staff and do the comparison of, using a personal service contract versus a consultant. And if we have, some of the construction upcoming, like the 138, is utility civil work. There are a lot of local personnel that could do that work. So if we have the ability to do a personal service contract through HART and we have the talent locally available, we're going to make those decisions. So that's the further evaluation that I was speaking of, and whether we would use, the PGJ Chuang is a highly reputable core system guideway CE&I. We may not need that expertise in some of the upcoming projects. So I'm hoping that I have the flexibility to make those decisions on a project-by-project basis so that we can just use our funds appropriately.
Ms. Scott, I'd like to commend you to at least you're aware of us staying under the budget. Something refreshing to hear of late. The other thing is, and this came out in both the PMOC and the peer review, was how we can transition more of our consultant work to our in-house people, which we can pick up at less cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead.
The contract for this particular construction management consultant is virtually going to double. I mean, nearly double. If it started at 54 and you're expecting it to close out at maybe 90, right? It's almost doubling. And this is the consequence of a decision that was made to unbundle the stations from 9 into 3 bundles. So this is an expense that should have been anticipated at the time that decision was made, and there are probably other collateral expenses associated with unbundling it. So I guess the question that I'm having, or I'm just maybe expressing a view, it sounds like the costs that were the costs that were saved from unbundling from 9 into one contract into 3 is not going to be, the savings is not going to be as great because there are other costs associated with it that's going to rise as a result of this decision. I'm not questioning, I said, I don't want to go back, I'm not criticizing or judging. I'm just saying that's a consequence for why now we're looking at rail costing $8.1 billion as opposed to whatever it was, $5 billion then.
You're absolutely correct. And in the rebaselining of the project.
I don't think that's the cause of why it went from 5 to 8.
No, not, this is just one of the factors though, isn't it? It's not?
I don't believe so because of the fact that, it did, you're right in the sense that the original, when it went out to the 9 bids, station one time compared to the 3, we did save money by doing that. Now, I don't think, you're right, and I don't think it was figured on, having these extra costs in there. And I'm not too sure on that, but it would kind of offset and so if you look at it in hindsight, maybe, again, what I think it did happen was it gave our local companies more accessible to these jobs and the local people getting to work as well because of that. But you're right, it may just kind of balance what was saved, so. Anything else? Thank you. Any public testimony on top of this? Okay, seeing none. Item B on change orders, construction engineering inspection west, additional funding for PH Wong of an increase of $16 million to their contract for, and I want to make it correct, it was for the fiscal year 2018. Is that correct? Okay.
1 year.
1 year. Okay, can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion, second.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Thank you. C?
Excuse me, Chair, I need
Yes.
to leave for a previous commitment, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Will you
I believe we still have quorum.
still have quorum?
Yeah, for voting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
I
you.
apologize.
No, no problem.
This change order is for the current utility construction agreement that we have with HECO. And it covers the west Oahu Farrington Highway segment of the Guyway. It's approximately 7.2 miles. The DB contracts for the work here led to Kiewit was in December of 2009. And the work was begun, and then we had some problems with the NTPs. But the essence is that and originally the design builder was to actually design and construct the pathways, the duct banks, the places where the power lines would eventually run and get out of the way of the guideway. But when it came time to actually procure that work, the original intent was to go out with Kiewit and for a change order. And the pricing that came in was much more than was originally envisioned. So we approached HECO. HECO agreed to enter into a utility construction agreement, and that was in 2013. At that time, the scope was mainly 35 impediments along the guideway that needed to be cleared. The $14 million was based upon HECO's experience with this type of work. There was no definitive designs at that time available. And so we went ahead and entered into that agreement. Fast forward, say I'm doing this. So, and this is a time and material contract with HECO. So we only pay for what they actually spend, plus an overhead, but they do not, we do not pay any profit to HECO. The justification is the fact that along the lines when we were actually getting to today, in 2015, we have the issue of having to actually provide power to the stations and to the traction power substations. There are 6 stations along this portion of the Guyway, starting with East Kapolei, going to UH West Oahu, then Ho'opili, and then coming down to Westlock, Waipahu, and then ending at Leeward Community College. All of these stations, once they're built, are going to have permanent power. $1.5 million of the work associated with in this change is to provide those stations permanent power. The other portion that needs permanent power are the traction power substations. And in this portion of the work, We have two TPSS locations. One is at East Kapolei, TPSS 1, and the second one is at Waipahu, which is TPSS 8. And both of those require permanent power as well. And just to be clear on the scope, the foundation work and all the duct banks requiring for the pathways to power these substations is built by the design build contractor. The actual equipment for the substation is supplied by Ansaldo, which is the core systems contractor. HECO's work is to actually install all the electrical lines up to the transformer, which they also will supply, or switchgear, and then from that transformer switchgear over to the substation equipment. And that is the extent of HECO's work. The other element of consequence here is the question of Davis-Bacon, which is yet to be resolved. It's going to the Labor Board. But in order to accommodate Davis-Bacon, they had to switch their payment for all the craft workers from monthly to weekly, and they also have to have certified payroll. So portions of the Davis-Bacon Act, which requires those elements have been accomplished and also would be incorporated in this agreement. We have set aside $1.5 million if we have to go to pay prevailing wage, which has not yet been decided. And of course, if we don't end up having to pay prevailing wage, then that money will not be spent. And then there's a small amount of work there were originally 35 impediments. They ended up being 39 impediments. So there's another $207,000 associated for those 4 impediments, which had to be taken out of the way of the guideway. So in essence, we had a $14 million utility agreement with HECO. We're going to add $3,228,255 to that agreement, bringing it to $17,228,255. And as I said earlier, this is a time and material agreement with HECO. The monies that they have to spend the money in order to be reimbursed. If we don't have if we don't end up going Davis-Bacon and end up with prevailing wage, then that money won't be spent. So, do we have any questions?
Are there any questions?
John, on the Davis-Bacon, how is that question being submitted to whom? The Labor Department or by HECO?
No, it's being by HECO to the Labor Department to see if they fall under that umbrella.
Does HECO is expecting, will be paying, if it is Davis-Bacon, we have to come up with the extra money, basically is what's happening, right?
Correct.
So HECO doesn't care one way or another, I suppose.
No, well, they only care that they have the money to be able to pay for it. But
Right. So if they, what I'm saying is that the outcome doesn't cost them anything, basically.
no. Well, it does cost them one thing, because the reimbursement does not cover any legal fees or any attorney's fees that they had to incur in order to go through the process.
Well, I guess my question goes more to if they're sort of, if they don't have much of a stake other than what the cost of having their in-house counsel, which sounds like it's being pursued through at the moment, raise the questions. I guess what I'm saying is that we're the ones who, and the public are the ones who have the stake. We have to pay the money if it's determined that way, but I'm just curious as to whether it's something that there should be more advocacy on in terms of one way or the other. Presumably, from our perspective, we would think that there shouldn't be.
Yeah, our perspective is that it shouldn't be.
So I don't know. I guess I'm just asking: is there a way that we, because we are the real stakeholder in this, should be participating in how the question is posed and taken to, the Labor Department, as opposed to leaving it to HECO, who is going to be paid one way or the other, so it doesn't really care as much as we do as to what the outcome may be.
Well, I think we have done some advocacy, because we went to the FTA and asked them whether they felt like that this would fall under Davis-Bacon. And my understanding is the FTA has said, no, it should not.
Okay, but the FTA is not making a decision.
No.
So it's going to be left. So I guess there's some mechanism through which we can encourage HECO or participate in the actual participation of this, if it makes sense to do so.
I have initiated some dialogue with CEO of HECO to take these and a couple of other issues and talk to them about it.
I think that perhaps the query is that if we, HART, doesn't think that it should come under Davis-Bacon, that we should have a stronger role in advocating that position, because HECO has little at stake in the outcome of that position, because they're going to ask us to pay for it anyway, and so we're the ones who have the greater interest that needs to be protected.
Absolutely.
So let me chime in on this because I know about this case. But it all depends on the scope of work of what Hawaiian Electric has to do. And I think the state that Hawaiian Electric is taking a stance that it doesn't come under Davis-Bacon, because otherwise it may affect other jobs that they have as well too. So the question I know Department of Labor asks is exactly what is their scope of work, who issued the work, and all of that. It sounds like in this case, after talking to John, that in my opinion, would not fall under Davis-Bacon for the fact that they're doing their transmission work from their property of the transmission lines over to their equipment. The housing and everything is being built under another contract, like you said, the design build contractors. So it's similar to your home. There's a property line division. They bring it up to a certain point, and you pay for, with your housing, your electrician will, do a duct line to up your property, and after that, Hawaiian Electric picks it up. It sounds like the same way, in which case it would, to me, in my opinion, it would not fall under the Davis-Bacon Act itself. So, because that was a question that was posed about what was the scope of work and how much are they getting into doing the work, was a question, yeah. But it's been over a year already.
Yes.
I think in the federal department trying to make a decision on top of this. So I don't know where it stands.
So I think just the point where it is, if when you meet with Alan or whoever the senior management you're meeting with at HECO, just ask if we can participate in the proceedings or whatever it is, application, inquiry, to make sure that our position is well stated.
Sure, will do.
Any other questions? Any testimony from the public? Yes.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record. Just, I guess, a clarification. One of the staff members mentioned that there was an estimate of 1.5 million for the Davis-Bacon, and does that mean that that's included in the 3.2 million, or exactly what is that 1.5 million? And if this is such, it sounds like most of you believe that Davis-Bacon doesn't apply, but this, I think it's been actually a year, more than a year, that this has been discussed at the federal level. And so why is it taking so long? It just doesn't, if it's so easy, why is it continuing to be an issue? The other question I had is, if we do have to pay the Davis-Bacon, what is the overall cost that is estimated for this, and is that included in the budget? Because this has been one of the things that I've been concerned about, that it's been kind of out there, but it hasn't been really spoken about until now. I appreciate the dialogue that has occurred. So I just ask you to follow through with that as well. Thank you.
Okay. So I know one answer is we don't control the federal government on making the decision on how long they take. But the question to that 1.5, is it included in this $14 million?
It's included in the $3.2 million increase.
I'm sorry, $3.2 million increase. Okay. Okay. So if not, then again, minus roughly the 1.5.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I think
Yes.
To expand on Mr. Zia's comment, I think we should go beyond just asking Hawaiian Electric. I think we should look at some legal, if we have legal standing, we should at least look at that. You know, so can you have our staff see what we can do legally? Where we have some other, you know, cases where, kind of like friend of the court kind of thing, where we can submit our positions. We should look at other ways of doing it.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from council whether that's possible. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Good suggestion. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? If not, motion. Let me read it to make sure I get it correctly. Hawaiian Electric on the Wolf Utility Construction Agreement change order for the electrical services of $3.2 million. Is that correct? To HECO's contract.
Move to approve.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Moving next to agenda on item number 10, the recruitment solicitation of interest from screening and selection of candidates for permanent executive director and CEO.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we go into executive session.
Okay, do I hear a
Second.
second?
I've got to read this.
Oh, well, I'll read it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, executive session. The board may enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Status, Section 92-4 and subsection 92-5A2 to consider and hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee, or of charges brought against an officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved. The subsection 92-5A4 to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues on a matter pertaining to board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. Motion has been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we're adjourned to executive session. We are back from executive session on the recruitment and solicitation and interest from screening selection of candidates for permanent executive director and CEO. We are going to continue discussion further. Moving on to item number 11, which is construction and traffic update. Is there any reason why the board needs to have that today? Seeing none. Moving on to item number 12, May monthly progress report. Murthy.
Mr. Chairman, you already have it in your package. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, moving to item number 13, April Project Management Oversight Consultant Report.
You also have that report in your package. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer it.
Anybody have any questions for Murthy? Seeing none. Item number 14, Interim Executive Director and CEO's Report. Murthy.
Yes, sir. I have a couple of items to report. Recently, the House Legislature, the Senate President and the House Speaker sent a letter to FTA to hold a special session later this summer to address the rail funding issue. I was encouraged to read that, and our federal partners, FTA, were anxious to see what actions are being taken. So they were sort of given some assurance that the actions are in place. So hopefully they will wait to see the results of the special session before they take any action. I did attend the After Ride conference in Baltimore. I was there, attended several sessions, and also met with several industry leaders. So it was a good participation, get to know the latest technology and issues that the industry is facing. I made a presentation in Kapolei on June 2nd. There was about 140 people there, basically giving them the status of the project, what we are doing, what we are planning. It was pretty well received, and they were extremely supportive of the rail project. We did the public outreach function regarding the airport guideway and stations, where the media was invited that we were doing the shaft, sinking test shaft work. So I think it got good reviews from the press on that one. Lastly, I forgot to say that Mr. Brennan Moriaka, our Deputy Project Director, Deputy Executive Director, resigned, and his last date will be end of this month. I would like to publicly thank him for his nearly 5 years of service to this project and all his contribution he has made. We will miss him. And that concludes my report.
Okay. I just want to comment as well too. Working with Brennan has been great. For that almost 5 years, he has a lot of knowledge coming from the state side. With transportation and all. Yeah, he surely will be missed at this.
Yes. Totally agree.
I echo that same sentiment. Brennan devoted a considerable amount of his personal time to helping myself personally, and I know Damien and other directors to better understand this project and its challenges. And he was always very creative and passionate in addressing the challenges of this project. And a prime example is coming up with that solution with HECO on the undergrounding the utilities in the West Farrington Highway segment, and finding these alternative bucket trucks to avoid having to underground a lot of utilities, and it saved the project hundreds or a lot of money. I can't remember the exact amount, but tens of millions of dollars. And so he will be missed.
Anybody? Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Murthy, for your report.
I have a question, Mr. Murthy. Regarding the peer review, when can we expect a draft on the revised project management plan?
It's being in the final version. The review it's under review at this point.
Okay.
We should be able to finish in next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
And also the quality plan. We're also finalizing that too.
Okay.
Amber.
Glenn's comment reminded me that perhaps at a meeting, one of our next meetings or whatever, that we could actually have a presentation from Mr. Murthy about where he is in terms of implementing or not implementing the after peer review recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think that when I read the peer review, and your response, concurs, we will do blah blah blah, and some of it, the timing that you suggested has passed, and so I don't know where we are on that. And so I think it would be good to just get an update on the whole thing.
Very good.
I'll be happy to do that.
So Cindy, yeah, we can put that on the next agenda item. Thank you. Moving on to item number 15, HART forensic audit and reevaluation. I would like to call executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Status Section 92-4 and subsection 92-5A4. The board may enter into executive session to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues on a matter pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities with regard to the matter set forth in this part. So can I get a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? We are now in executive session again. Thank you. We are back from executive session regarding to item number 15. Terry?
Oh, so in our discussion on the budget, we noted that there was a line item for special audit, and that at times had been referred to as a forensic audit. That special audit was not meant to be a forensic audit, and therefore I motion that no forensic audit is needed or needs to be conducted.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
There's a second. Before we take a vote, is there anybody that would like to testify, public testimony? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is carried. We are now recessed to July 6th, Ali'i Place, same place, room over here at 12 p.m. Okay? Meeting adjourned, not adjourned, recessed, sorry.